is long. XXIV. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Dispatch, this knave's tongue begins to double. Sound trumpets, alarum to the combatants. King Henry VI. Act 2, Scene 3. Julia hadn't been home for over 3 years, since before 1022 in fact, and she was astounded at how complicated the journey had become these days. Massive airport security boarding the plane at LAX was something she was used to, but having to go through the same extensive screening when she got off the plane in Portland was a new one on her. This included X-rays, metal detectors, and full searches of her checked luggage and her laptop, her carry-on bag and briefcase as well by sullen maroon-jacketed sky marshals, most of whom seemed to be Hispanic or black, and all of whom carried holstered Glocks on their hip. It took her almost 2 hours from the time she stepped off the plane until she finally got into the main arrival lounge. And even then there were differences. The terminal was a lot more quiet than she remembered other airports ever being, and she quickly spotted the probable cause. In almost every corner, and strolling up and down the causeway, were pairs of blue-black uniformed men and a few women in heavy body armor, with helmets and dark visors, carrying M16 seconds with infrared sights. On their backs in bright gold letters were the letters FATPO, the acronym of the Federal Anti-Terrorist Police Organization. Julia noticed that people were trying to avoid the government gun thugs as much as possible without seeming to do so. They seemed to have a habit of stopping people in the terminal for no reason, barking orders and glowering and demanding documents. The Iron Heel had arrived in the northwest. Then Julia spotted a slim, middle-aged man in a blue blazer and white trousers who was holding up a cardboard sign with the word Lear on it in magic marker. She walked up to him, pulling her travel suitcase behind her on its casters. "Hello, I'm Julia Lear," she said to the man. "Wally Post," he said, shaking her hand. "Mr. Blaustein said you would meet me, but why?" asked Julia. "I have a little company here called Oregon Security Associates," explained Post. "I used to be a PI, but since the trouble started, we specialize in tourism and business travel. We make sure people who need to visit our fair city of roses and certain of our scenic rural areas for any legitimate reason can come in, get their business done, and get out without incident. You might say I'm your trusty native guide. I'll get you through the jungle safely and keep you away from the lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Being a native of this particular jungle myself, I don't think I need a guide," said Julia with a laugh. "Blaustein says you haven't been up here since things started going boom in the night," Post told her. "The jungle is a lot more dangerous now, Mem Sahib." He glanced behind her. Case in point. Julia felt a heavy hand on her shoulder, and she turned to find a huge black man in FATPO body armor behind her. His partner, a smaller Mexican, was standing several paces away with the muzzle of his M16 pointed right at Julia's midriff. "Who you be, woman, and what the fuck you doing coming into my town?" demanded the black belligerently. Before the stunned Julia could reply, Post deftly slid a small card out of his shirt pocket and extended it to the FATPO. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he said suavely. "I'm Wally Post from OSA. This lady is from Paradigm Studios in Hollywood, and I'm escorting her to make sure she is safe from the insurgents. As you can see, I have a courtesy card from your commanding officer, Colonel Aceveda. His cell number is on the back." The huge Negro glanced at the card, but was evidently familiar with the system in place, and he handed it back. "You want to be safe from the racist motherfuckers. You ought be hanging with the po while you in town," he said to Julia with a leering grin. "Actually, she's here gathering background for a movie Paradigm is considering. All about you FATPO heroes and your gallant battle against hate and terrorism," said Post smoothly. "Yeah?" spoke up the Mexican. "You gonna need some of us PO boys for actors in your movie essay?" "The more authentic the better," agreed Julia. "Das cool. I like to be a movie star essay. I'm Private Ramirez, Tiburcio Ramirez, but my homies in Depo call me Can Grande. Das big dog in Spanish. You need some technical advice or something, you look me up, okay, mommy?" "I'll remember," promised Julia. The black man's radio crackled. Something unintelligible came out. He grunted to the Mexican and they moved away down the terminal causeway. Julia stared after them and swallowed. "A lot of them are former gangbangers from LA, New York, Chicago, Miami, places like that," explained Post conversationally. "How bad could that have gotten?" asked Julia nervously. Post smiled. Here in public, in the daylight? Probably not too bad, if you had sense enough to keep your cool and keep it light and bantering. Out there at night, on some street corner or on some dark rural highway with no one around but you and them? Bad. Very bad. What was that card in your pocket, and how did you get it? Asked Julia. The Portland commander of the FATPO is one Colonel Reynaldo Aceveda, a Colombian. I'm told he used to work for the CIA down there. He clearly thinks he's back in Medellin, and for all practical purposes I guess he is. The fatties are his own private army. They're legally immunized both by Congress and by a presidential executive order against prosecution for anything they care to do to anyone. In the few short weeks he's been here, Aceveda's already making money hand over fist with a dozen scams, mostly involving protection from his own armored goons. That card has his private cell number written on the back in green, which means I've paid him for a certain level of protection and cooperation. That's the middle-level card, one cut above black ink. I won't tell you how much I paid because you wouldn't believe me. If I can get you in and out in one piece, and you can get done whatever it is he wants you to do, Mr. Blaustein has promised me a bonus big enough to buy a red card off Aceveda, one with his number written in red ink. That's the one you really want. What does a red card get you? Asked Julia. Or do I really want to know? Post gave her a chilly smile. Among other things, with a red card I can kill people. How are you planning on getting down to Astoria, ma'am? Renting a car like I usually do, said Julia bemused. Not recommended, said Post, shaking his head. Doesn't matter if you take Highway 30 or Highway 26, you're going to run into at least a couple of FATPO checkpoints, and once you get past those, usually between Rainier and Clatskanie, you may run into a few NVA checkpoints as well. Cap Hatfield likes to keep up with who's coming in and out of his manor. The Goots know the local people and don't bother them, but I'm not sure if you're still considered local or not. And I really would not recommend a single white woman trying to get through a fatty roadblock after dark. These guys aren't regular police or even regular military. They're a brute squad sent in here by Hillary Clinton to stomp on anybody with a white skin who looks at them wrong. You need me, Miss Lear. Really, you do. Blaustein hired me to get you there and back. Please let me do so. Okay, said Julia, shaking her head in wonderment. Let's go. She followed Post out of the terminal and into the short-term parking tiers, and he loaded her baggage into a new Jeep Cherokee. As they were pulling out of the airport and onto a feeder road heading to Interstate 5, Julia said carefully, You mentioned a guy called Cap Hatfield. I thought his name was Zack? It is, said Post. He's an NVA captain, so the locals call him Captain Zack or Cap, and the media seem to have picked up on it. Real cowboy, packs a Winchester and uses it too. Hatfield killed some hotshot U.S. Marshal last year who challenged him to a duel or something, faced him down in the street in Clatskanie with that rifle and knocked him ass over head before the Fed could get his Glock clear of the holster. The local cops seem to have decided to just stay the hell out of his way, and after that they damn sure did. The 1st Portland Brigade of the NVA has 3 battalions. Hatfield is commander of the 3rd Battalion. Call themselves the Wild Bunch. Nobody knows how big the first 2 are, but the 3rd Battalion seems to be pretty big, and it covers a really huge area, pretty much from roughly Rainier on down to Astoria and as far south as Cannon Beach or so. His guys have pretty much taken over down where you're going. From there on down to Newport, it's the 2nd Oregon Coastal Brigade, commanded by some Swede who calls himself Ragnar Redbeard. His real name is Dan something. Guy's a real head case. He's got a boat he set up like a Viking long ship with shields on the side and a dragon head prow. Back when there were still Mexicans along that stretch of 101, he used to chop them up and go fishing using the bits and pieces as bait. No more Mexicans around, though. Once it all started up after 10-20 seconds, they got the message real fast. You won't hear any Spanish outside Portland now. Well, that will be a change from L.A., said Julia. I imagine so, agreed Post. He took an exit and started heading down toward the river. You know this Hatfield personally? Asked Julia casually. Why? Inquired Post. Because he's the man I'm going to Astoria to see, said Julia. I don't know if I should be telling you this or not, but the fact is that once I get to Astoria, I haven't got a clue how to get hold of him. I do have some contacts in local law enforcement, so to speak, but Well, I'm not sure they'll discuss things with me. I don't even know how to go about asking, she concluded, shaking her head. I wouldn't be broadcasting that about, said Post carefully. You're lucky. I'm something of an ethical mercenary, and when I'm paid, I stay bought. But there are those who would shop you to the fatties in a heartbeat if they found out something like that about you. There is a lot of reward money on the hoof moving around the Northwest these days, ma'am. Every mother's son and daughter of the NVA has a basic $50,000 DT on his or her head. That's domestic terrorist bounty, and from there it goes up depending on how naughty the individual volunteer has been. I think Hatfield's up to over $500,000 now. In addition to all the other gun-toting loons we have up here now, we got bounty hunters and freelance snitches under every rock. These people have women members? Asked Julia in surprise. Wait, what am I talking about? That's a stupid thing for me to say. I knew one of them myself. Erica Collingwood. Yeah, they got women, some of them real hotties, no offense, chuckled Post. Erica, and Melanie Young with the Olympic flying column, and that tattooed biker chick who shot up Flanders Street and killed the police chief along with Cat Eyes Lockhart and those other gnarly dudes. Anyway, to answer your question, I wouldn't be much of a native guide if I didn't know all the tribes and customs along the way. I'll make some calls, very carefully of course, and I'll see what I can do to speed things along and find Cap for you. He pulled the jeep into a small boat dock by the river. Where are we going? Asked Julia in surprise. Astoria, the same way Lewis and Clark got there, said Post. He pulled up to a slip containing a motorboat about 25 feet in length named the Nemo. What can I say? Movies are everywhere and my kids love that one. We'll be heading down along the river. Lucky for you, it's June and the sun doesn't set until almost 10, so it should be still light when we pull into the Astoria dock. The trip was magnificent, down the mighty Columbia River under a high summer sun. Julia spent the entire voyage sitting in a lawn chair on the deck, accepting Post's offer of a late lunch, of homemade ham and Swiss sandwiches on rye from plastic baggies, and multiple bottles of Henry Weinhard beer from a cooler. She had never made the trip on the water before, and she found herself stunned and awed by the incredible beauty of her own native land. Both the Oregon and Washington banks were sun-dappled and glowing in brown and evergreen, and sea lions barked on the shore. The smokestacks of Longview still spewed their white fumes into the air, and great container ships still plied the waterway up and down to and from Longview and Portland. Other than the occasional police boat along the way, there seemed to be no sign that there was an insurgency going on. As they sailed beneath the great bridge at Longview, Julia went up to join Post on the bridge. I know this sounds stupid, but you'd think if the NVA was trying to overthrow the government and wreck everything, they would have blown up this bridge, and the big 101 bridge down in Astoria, she said. I thought proper guerrillas were supposed to blow up bridges. Then how would they get across the river? Swim? Responded Post with a chuckle. Besides, guerrillas don't get very far if they totally ruin the lives of the local people they rely on for support. The local fuzz reached a modus vivendi with Jerry Reb on the bridges. The cops don't put any checkpoints or cameras on either side of the bridges, and the NVA let the bridges stay up. Some of the state police and federals didn't get the message during the first year or so and tried checkpoints, here in Longview and Astoria. The Wild Bunch simply shot the checkpoints on the Oregon side all to hell, and their colleagues in Cowlitz and Pacific counties shot them to hell on the Washington side. After half a dozen dead state troopers and FBI, the law realized they were just providing the NVA with targets and losing men for nothing, and so they pulled in their horns. Same thing with all these container vessels. The NVA could choke off the Columbia River maritime industry anytime they want. They could just get up on that bridge at Astoria and drop a bomb on some Chinese freighter. They might sink it in mid-channel and block off the whole river. Even if they didn't, they would effectively bottle everything up, because most captains and crews don't really fancy a 100-mile voyage along a river where you're mostly within small arms or at least rocket range of one shore or other, and somebody's shooting at them. The feds are probably pretty nervous that someday Jerry Reb will do just that, but the fact is that the U.S. military and cops are already stretched so thin that they simply can't guard hundreds of miles of riverbank and coast by placing troops every few yards, which is what they'd have to do. As bad as things are here, the overwhelming majority of America's 4 million troops are still overseas, trying to hold down 6 or 7 countries in the Middle East at any given time. So the powers that be just leave it and cross their fingers. Looks like they've gotten some extra manpower on the ground, from what I saw at the airport, commented Julia. Those are thugs, not soldiers, Post reminded her. They are not here to perform legitimate military tasks. They're here to spread terror and intimidation and frighten white people into submission to the regime. But you're right, at some point fairly soon, they're going to have to try and move in downriver here, especially into Astoria. Astoria has become almost a kind of liberated zone where white people can live safely and peacefully among their own kind. The United States can't allow that. You sound like you sympathize with them, said Julia. Look, Wally, I'm grateful to you for the help. You're right, I might be in trouble without it, and I don't want to offend you or start an argument, but I have to remind you that these people are murderers. They've murdered some of my friends, including slaughtering some of them on live nationwide TV a few months ago at the Oscars. Well, I'm just a hired hand and I won't get into a political discussion, ma'am, said Post. When you get into a war, one of the first things that becomes completely irrelevant is who started what. But you saw back at the airport how the United States government has responded. Let me ask you, ma'am, if destiny has decreed that the old Brady Bunch life is gone forever, as I think it has, and you had to deal with armed men in the dark of night on some street or some stretch of highway, who would you rather run into, that Monkoid and his beaner buddy back at the airport, or Zack Hatfield? I don't know, said Julia, shaking her head. I really don't. I'd rather not have to choose. That's the problem, said Post gently. Eventually, you may have to. You can be ruled by gunmen from a different race, or gunmen from your own. That's a shitty deal, but it's a lot older situation than our so-called democracy here. Insofar as we ever really had one, which was never very far. As Julia Lear was enjoying her cruise down the Columbia, back in Portland, Lieutenant Billy Jackson of a company, 1st Brigade, sat in the back room of an upscale tanning salon in a small strip mall just off Skyline Boulevard. The place was called the Children of the Sun, appropriately enough. So far, no one in the United States government had been sufficiently erudite to spot the ancient name of the Aryan peoples of the earth. Jackson had just finished a conversation with a young white man of nondescript appearance, who slipped out the back when he was through saying what he had to say. Jackson looked at Gary Bressler with a grim face. The news had not been good. I'll contact the commandant and bring him up to speed, said Bressler. But we've got to have a quiet word of prayer with that newshound, no question. How do you want to handle it? Jackson flipped open his phone and dialed a number. When his call was answered, he said, Hey, Tomboy. I just got into town and I was hoping to catch you. How about a late lunch? What's the best steakhouse in Portland? Never mind, we'll figure something out. I'm at the Pioneer Inn. The Pioneer Inn was downtown and nowhere near Jackson's location, but it was the code word for the tanning salon. Can you break loose from whatever you're doing? Great. Oh, and be sure to bring that friend of yours, Becky. Mom has heard a lot about her, and she wants a full report. He hung up and looked at Bressler. We're going to have to extract Zucchino and take him off somewhere for our little talk, and that means we've got to get him out of the hotel without attracting attention. We're going to need a Lorelei on this one. Becky, asked Bressler. You think she's up for it? I wouldn't have called her in if I didn't think she is, said Jackson. But we'll find out soon enough. Eric Sellers and Annette Ridgway were seated together in a lecture hall on the Portland State University campus when Jackson's call came in. Eric had his NVA special throwaway phone on vibrate, so it didn't ring out loud and he was able to conduct a sotto voce conversation without anyone other than his immediate neighbors knowing he was on the phone, and without disturbing the desiccated professor who was droning on about the vital importance of the Native American tradition in American history. Eric's grades had been good enough, and Annette's father was rich enough, so that they both could have gone to any college or university in the country. It caused some surprise and a bit of consternation among their parents when both had insisted on remaining close to home and attending the distinctly second-string and highly politically correct PSU, but with a little blarney they had been able to put it across. Annette told her father she still wasn't comfortable leaving her mother alone, which was a valid enough reason, since Lorraine was still shaky and still on way too much medication for either Annette's liking or her father's. She also pointed out that PSU did have one crackerjack asset, an executive MBA program that would look very good on her resume. Eric told his father that PSU had all the requisite pre-engineering courses he would need before he went on to Stanford or MIT or some other science-heavy campus, and he was open about his desire not to be separated from Annette, which his dad fully understood. It was by now accepted that barring some unforeseen circumstances, at some point in the middle-term future the two would marry. Both families were grateful, since neither now had to worry about the great American nightmare of what sort of revolting specimen of humanoid creature their son or daughter would bring home one day. The young people had acceded to their parents' request that they wait until after they both got their bachelor's degrees, so on the home front everything was smooth sailing. Both sets of parents were intensely relieved that there were no signs of drug use, insanity, or dysfunctional neurosis in either Eric or Annette, and that both seemed to be serious and goal-oriented young adults. They assumed that when their kids were out at all kinds of strange hours they were shacking up somewhere, but in view of how much worse they knew it could have been, they counted their blessings and said nothing. Nor had Ray Ridgway ever mentioned his missing handgun. After some preliminary arguments, both families had decided that their children would do 2 years at PSU and get all their basic credits under their belts before transferring to a more high-caliber institution for their degree. They were not yet aware that the only two choices the pair would consider when the time came would be the University of Oregon at Eugene, which was prime for Eric with its strong research emphasis, or the University of Washington in Seattle, which would be better for Annette's business degree, and that the choice would be dictated by the lovers' superiors in the NVA, based on where they could be the most use to the revolution. "The boss man wants us both at the Pioneer Inn ASAP," Eric whispered to Annette.
"Wait 10 minutes until the bell rings and class is over,"
Annette whispered back. "Remember, this bullshit is a PC-required credit to make sure our skulls are properly filled with mush about Indians. If we walk out, we might draw suspicion. Besides, I want to get on this asshole's good side, so maybe we can set him up for a hit down the line." The United States Constitution was not based on the oral laws of the Iroquois Confederation. It was based on the glorious revolution of 1688 in England. Jesus, what fucking pig ignorance. Where do they get this crap? "Mostly they just make it up," said Eric. "Who's going to argue with them when contradicting a politically correct professor in class can get you 5 years in prison?" It took them almost an hour after they left the campus to get to Skyline Boulevard in Annette's Lexus because Eric carefully took a maze of back streets to avoid the new FATPO checkpoints that were springing up all over Portland like mushrooms. Finally, they walked into the Children of the Sun. The muscular and well-tanned young beach boy type behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you? We've got an introductory discount. You guys do look a little pale." "Yeah, I hear this is where some other pale people hang out," said Eric. A yellow legal pad and a pen lay on the desk, and the young man looked Eric in the eye while he drew a line diagonally across the page. "Pale's not too fashionable these days," he said. "You're a lot better off brown." Eric glanced down at the paper and picked up the pen. "You look like you speak from experience." He crossed the diagonal line with another, making a large X on the paper. "I bet you could even pass as a Mexican if you wanted," said Annette, picking up the pen and adding in the 4 cross arms to complete the swastika. The young man smiled, tore the paper off the sheet, and fed it into a shredder underneath the counter. "I have, 4 years of Spanish in school actually turned out to be good for something." He nodded to the rear. Annette and Eric walked down a corridor past cubicles of overweight yuppies of both genders broiling themselves on the tables and entered the back room. They found Jackson and Bresler waiting for them, sitting at a folding table. "Saw you come in on the monitor," said Jackson. He pointed to 2 chairs, one with a can of diet soda and one with a mug of steaming tea. "Herbal, right? Not sure if that's the kind you like." "Thank you, sir," said Annette as she and Eric sat down. Jackson leaned forward. "Comrades, we have a problem and we need your help, especially your help, Becky. You may be aware that Portland is full of media people. Reporters and TV crews and anchor persons and freelancers and such reptilian beings from all over the world come to cover our glorious democracy's battle against the evil forces of terrorism and hate, all that crap. Ever since Fatty moved into town, the government has adopted a policy of embedding them, as they call it. Same thing they did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Same reason, make sure that they can't get off the reservation and see and report on things they shouldn't. This is especially important since Fatty is already doing a lot of things he shouldn't, and Zog doesn't. Want the world to know about it. All media personnel now have to be registered with FATPO, and they are assigned so-called security escorts wherever they go. Everything that goes out is censored, or it's supposed to be. The regime is trying to maintain a chokehold on public perception of the trouble in the Northwest. Obviously, we need to break that chokehold. But that's big picture stuff. Our problem is specific. The media have been assigned several large hotels, mostly downtown, where they are all billeted, and where they do their drinking and schmoozing and war story swapping and bed hopping and other journalist stuff. In theory, they're not supposed to leave the premises without a security escort of some kind. FATPO, or at least one of the so-called contractors. In practice, that's pretty porous, as you can imagine. One of the habitués of the Benson Hotel on South Broadway is a reporter for the Los Angeles Times named Dawson Zucchino. He's new in town, and we don't have any particular gripe with him. His articles are anti-NVA, but no more so than you would expect from an establishment newspaper, and they no doubt gain something in the editing. Normally, he'd be pretty far down on our list of potential targets, but something has come up that indicates that we need to take a closer look at him and ask him some questions, and we need to do it fast. Like tonight, if we can. We have to get him off somewhere away from his buddies and his FATPO escorts so we can detain him, take him to a secure location, and find out what he knows regarding a particular matter. This may turn out to be very important and time-sensitive information indeed, and if it is at all possible, we would like for this to be done so that his colleagues and the fatties don't know he's been abducted, because if they know we've taken him, they may be able to guess why, and that might blow the whole thing. The only way we can think of to do this is to set a honey trap. We're going to need a Lorelei. Becky, you indicated once that you were willing to do that duty if it was required. That time is now. Are you still willing? Annette glanced at Eric, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, Lieutenant, I am. I warn you that this is going to be a rush job and it may go bad, Jackson told her. If we can't keep you off the security cameras, it may well lead to blowing your cover and forcing you to go under and become a U-boat. There goes your education and maybe your whole future. Eric and I have talked about that, said Annette. We knew what we were in for when we said yes that day in the car, at Flamus's funeral. If that's the way it plays out, that's the way it plays out. If that happens, I go under with her too, said Eric. We understand that. You're a good team and we wouldn't want to break you up, Bressler assured him. Thank you, comrade, said Jackson. There was a tap on the door, and Bressler admitted a small and pudgy young man with a buzz cut, carrying a large canvas gym bag. Comrade Becky, this is Comrade Stiggs. He specializes in false ID, and you're going to need some right away. But first we need to select your coiffure for the evening. From the bag, Stiggs produced 4 women's wigs, 2 long-haired, 1 neck-length bob, and 1 short page boy style. That's all I could round up on short notice, he explained apologetically. Bressler pulled out a fairly large mirror and set it up on one of the metal shelves. After some preliminary experimentation and comments from the men, they settled on a long-haired black wig, the one Annette found most comfortable. Okay, Becky, next question. Have you ever worn contacts? Asked Jackson. No, said Annette. I really would like to change the color of your eyes. If you could wear contacts to make your green eyes brown, we could set you up as a mommy, said Stiggs. Thing is, that would also entail some grease paint to darken your visible skin if we want to do this right. Of course there are light-skinned and green-eyed Hispanic women. Can you do an accent? Fuck the accent. Can you actually speak Spanish? Asked Jackson. No, I took German in school, said Annette. Then we'd better not get too clever for our own good and try to turn you into a muchacha. The trouble with that is that you might run into a real beaner who tries to speak Spanish to you. In any case, if you've never worn contacts before, a sensitive mission like this isn't the time to start. With black hair and green eyes, you could be a Russian, but the same problem applies. There are enough Russians around, especially Jews, so you could run into problems. We don't have time to get real complicated with this anyway. You'll just have to be bimbo Americana. Let's get the sheet up. Stand here, please, comrade. Stiggs took a blue sheet from the gym bag. Bressler and Jackson held it up, and Annette stood in front of the sheet wearing the black wig, while Stiggs snapped 2 pictures of her with an Instamatic. Okay, Stiggsy, in addition to the driver's license, what else have you got on hand for a second photo ID? Jackson asked him. Pretty much anything you want, sir, said Stiggs. Student IDs from Oregon State and University of Oregon, PSU, UW, and Washington State. State employee, city employee, federal employee. I can even make her military or a Portland PB cop if you want. Complete with matching badge. She's a bit young for a cop, mused Jackson, rubbing his chin. But it would give her an excuse to carry a piece. Same problem, I might run into a real police checkpoint or stop and frisk. Make it a Portland State student ID, suggested Annette. I know the campus and I can rattle off conversation about school. Why not make me a journalism major? I can be some bright young thing really eager to break into the business. Hear all his gnarly Hemingway-esque adventures. Why does she need false ID at all? Asked Eric. So she can get into any bars or nightclubs that may be necessary, said Bresler. Only exception to General Order Number 10, remember? You'll have to make me 21 then, giggled Annette. Hey, that's an idea. Make me just turn 21 on June 1st, eager to get my first legal taste of John Barleycorn and the nightlife with a fascinating older man. Not bad, agreed Jackson. You can take your first official drink on a false ID supplied by the NVA while doing duty as Matahari, said Eric with a wry chuckle. PSU it is. She'll need some credit cards as well, said Jackson. Got any for females? Yeah, one set, said Stiggs. What's the name? Mary Jones, believe it or not, Stiggs told them. The real Mary Jones is a nigger who won't be needing them anymore. But remember, comrade, they're just for show. If someone has noticed the real Mary Jones is missing, they've either been canceled or just possibly the cops are keeping them live but red flagged to see if they show up when someone tries to use them. If the cops or fatties stop you and search your purse and they find nothing but a driver's license, they'll be suspicious. You need a lot of junk for it to look normal. I'll do you up a library card as, well, a dry cleaning receipt, that kind of thing, so it all looks kosher, pardon the expression. I need to get back to my crib and get these done, Lieutenant. It will take about 3 hours. Where do you want me to deliver them? I'll text you, said Jackson. You've got this month's codes? Yes, sir. I'd better get going. Good luck, Becky. I mean Mary, he said, as he zipped the bag closed and left. Jackson sighed. Okay, guys, have a seat, he said. Tom, you will be part of the extraction team, and after the pickup, your job will be getting Becky out of the area. Becky, you are going to be risking your life and your freedom tonight for our new country in the most dangerous task you have yet undertaken. You both have a right to know why this is necessary, and why it's such a rush. As I've mentioned before, the Benson Hotel is a media barracks now, and so needless to say, we've got an ear in. There to see who comes and goes, who is doing what, and listening to as much of the reptile's drunken ravings as he can overhear. It's a mine of information. These people are incredibly indiscreet when they're drinking, which is most of the time. Last night, the newshounds and newsians were holding forth at the bar, and the conversation swung around to Zack Hatfield and 3rd Battalion down along the North Shore. The wild bunch, put in Eric. The very ones, said Jackson with a nod. Dawson Zucchino was several sheets to the wind, which I gather is the normal condition for him late at night. He was coming on to one of his female associates, an anchorwoman for Fox News who was in town looking for on-the-spot dramatic coverage of the war on domestic terror, blah blah blah. As nearly as our guy could overhear, he was promising to let her in on some really big story if she would come upstairs with him and let him drop anchor. When she pressed him for details, he said, and this is the nearest to a direct quote our source can give us, I'm going to be there when that swaggering motherfucker Captain Zack gets his silly hat blown off his head, by Raleigh Rollins himself maybe. I'm going in embedded with the po' boys and watch them kick racist ass. And since my orders could come at any moment and send me into the thick of battle, surely I deserve one last hell or glory fuck from a beautiful colleague, or some melodramatic babble to that effect. Sure the guy really knows anything at all, sir? Asked Eric in surprise. He sounds like a drunken pompous ass.
That's the hell of it,
sighed Jackson. He may be just a drunken pompous ass who's mouthing off to try and get into some TV Barbie doll's pants, and it's possible I may be risking your lives and the lives of other comrades for nothing, but we simply can't take that chance. We do know a few things that make this remark of his disturbing. We know that a large force of FATPO, almost 1,000 men, were held back when the main body moved into the homeland, but were instead sent to Oakland Army Terminal in California. Nor has their head nigger in charge, former U.S. Congressman Roland Rollins, put in his appearance in the Northwest yet. No one seems to know where he is, the media have asked, but they're getting the undisclosed location wrap from the White House. Third section speculates that they're being held back as a kind of flying column of FATPO's own, who can be dropped in by helicopter or even trucked in as a strike force wherever they decide to open their own front, so to speak. If they're going into the North Shore area, they could even be coming in by sea. We also know that a force of helicopters, both transports and gunships, have been assembled at Fort Lewis for some unspecified purpose. They're painted FATPO black, so they're not going to Iraq or anywhere else overseas. They're going to try and hit us somewhere we don't expect. We know the regime has always been real nervous about Zack and his boys sitting astride the Columbia, with those two big bridges across the river at Astoria and Longview. Blow those bridges and block those container ships from coming upriver, and the American economy in the Northwest would be hurting bad. We've held off because of the intense hardship it would cause white people here in the homeland and the potentially bad blowback, but if I were the American general, I would make it a priority to secure both shores of the Columbia all the way up to Portland. They may be ready to make their move. We must find out if this asshole reporter actually knows anything. What exactly do you want me to do, sir? I mean, how? Asked Annette. Jackson pulled out several sheets of paper. Got this off the internet. This is Dawson Zucchino, from his column in the newspaper. The photo showed a man of about 40 with dark wavy hair and some hard wear already on his face, bags under his eyes and cheeks beginning to bloat and sag from too much alcohol and junk food. Then Jackson pulled out a yellow legal pad. It's going to be tricky. I don't like pulling any tickle downtown anymore, what with fatties roaming the streets like packs of wild dogs. I've done a couple of sketches for you, of the Benson Hotel and the streets surrounding it. If possible, I want you to intercept Zucchino somewhere outside the Benson, because if you have to approach him in the hotel bar or one of the restaurants inside, you won't be able to get in without showing your ID, going through a metal detector, which means you can't go in strapped, and you can't avoid being filmed by the CCTV cameras. I really would like to keep you off Fatty's silver screen, but if that's not possible, then you'll have to go into the Benson itself, pick him up, chat him up with all kinds of journalists and security around, and lure him outside with the promise of a sexual encounter so we can bag him. That's important. Get him to come out of the hotel. If he's inside the Benson, he'll want you to go up to his room with him, and there's no way we can get in and get him out without shooting and casualties. The hotel itself is guarded by private contractors, Blackwater Corporation mercenaries, some of whom are almost as nasty as the fatties themselves, and there will be plainclothes fatties inside the hotel as well assigned to the more major reporters under the buddy system they've worked out. If they tumble to you in there, you'll have as much chance as a mouse at a cat convention. No one questions your courage, comrade. You've proven it often enough since you came to us, but that's all the more reason I want you to come back from this one. We need you. Thank you, sir, said Annette. Now I have an idea. I want you to try to get him into another bar down Broadway from the Benson Hotel. About here, said Jackson, pointing to the impromptu map. Patty Grogan's Shamrock Pub. I know where that is, said Annette. It will be crowded, but a different kind of crowd, one you can get lost in rather than stand out in. We will have 2 vehicles, a van for the extraction and a second car for backup and interference if necessary. You and Tom will have to exit the area on foot and make it to a third vehicle, your own, during which time you must remove your disguise and resume your own identity, with some suitable reason for being downtown in case you're stopped and questioned. Do not be caught with Stigsy's false ID on you. Possession of false identification is now a class A terrorism offense and can expose you to the death penalty. The two of them bent over the paper. Bresler spoke up behind them. Billy, do you think we should notify Zack? Jackson thought a moment. Call the commandant and see what he thinks, but my feeling is let's wait and see if there's anything to this. Zack has contingency plans, I know, and it would be hard for him to be too much more alert than he is already. Even if they're coming down on him, they won't catch him by surprise. That much we can take to the bank. The sun was setting as Post helped Julia carry her luggage up the boat slip and onto the river walk at 31st Street in Astoria. Now she stood on the river walk and she was home again. The town looked quiet and peaceful, in a sense too quiet and peaceful for June. There should be tourists all up and down the river walk on a sunny summer night in June. She couldn't see the red and yellow trolley that usually ran up and down the riverside, its bell clanging. Crap. Now I'll have to see if I can find a cab, said Julia. Wait, there's one. To her surprise, the dusty blue taxicab pulled into the gravel lot beside them, and the cabbie got out. He waved at her. Ben, she called. Hey, Julie, welcome home, called Ben Svensson. Your mom sent me to get you. How did she know I was coming down the river? Asked Julia. I made a couple of those calls I mentioned while we were on the way down, said Post, loading her bags and her laptop into the cab's trunk. Okay, said Julia dubiously. Maybe I shouldn't ask. Probably not, agreed Post with a chuckle. He handed her a card. You'll be all right from here on in. Here's my cell phone. I'll hang around here until you're ready to go back, but do me a favor? Check in with me once or twice a day so I'll know you're okay. I don't get you back to Tinseltown in one piece. Mr. B doesn't give me my bonus. You're a cabbie now? Julie asked Svensson as they sped up the hill to the home of Julia's mother. Yeah, after 5 years on unemployment and welfare, I'm actually working again now, said Ben with a chuckle. Amazing, ain't it? Jobs in town going begging and glad as hell to hire us middle-aged white boys, whereas we USATA practically got spat on if we dared to put in an application anywhere. I inherited this cab from a Hindu fella. About 3 years back, he got a sudden urge to go back home and see the Taj Mahal or whatever. Left kind of sudden-like, along with all the Mexicans and drug dealers and all them damned fruit flies from California who moved in on us. No offense. None taken. California is indeed known for its fruit flies, agreed Julia, feeling a slow freak-out building. The streets she suddenly remembered so well were peaceful and golden in the sunset, and here and there she saw white children playing, running up and down, and white people out in their yards. The sudden absence of a sea of black and brown and yellow faces she was accustomed to was strange, disorienting. She was so used to being a minority in her own land that she could not understand the feeling she was experiencing. It was like a great weight lifting off her, but she could not understand why. Then she was standing on her own porch and hugging her mother. A minute later, she was inside the familiar kitchen watching a huge meal of meatloaf and potato salad being set down in front of her. For the next half hour, she ate and talked about movies in Los Angeles and the weather, and no young men in her life yet. Everything except what she had come for. Yet all. The Brigade. During that time, she somehow understood that through some process she could not fathom, her mother knew why she had come home. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, Mom, I need to talk to Ted. I was kind of expecting to see him here, but I can imagine what with the situation and all, his schedule is pretty hectic these days. What would be the best time to see him? Should I go to his office? Go to his house? I mean, I will, anyway. I want to see Rhodey and the kids, but I need to kind of get some private FaceTime with Ted. I'd rather not get into it, so let's just say it's work-related. I need him to find somebody for me. Mrs. Lear smiled. Dear, why don't you take your bags up to your room, your old one, and come back down and I'll see if I can get him to come over. Okay, said her daughter. Julia picked up her suitcases in the hall, put the strap of her laptop up to her shoulder, and mounted the stairs. She went into her old room, which she was glad and yet somewhat saddened to see that her mother still kept the very same as it had been the day she left for college, including the posters of rock stars no one remembered anymore and her stuffed animals on the bed. She tossed the laptop onto the bed, turned to the closet with the suitcase, and nearly jumped out of her skin when she saw a tall man with a weather-beaten face and a broad-brimmed feathered hat on his head, sitting in the corner armchair. A Winchester rifle leaned in the corner. Zack Hatfield rose and politely took off his hat. Hello, Julia, he said. At about the same time, Annette Ridgway was sitting down the street from the Benson Hotel on South Broadway. In the passenger seat of a green Toyota Tundra, the NVA's backup vehicle for the evening. It was still full light out. Lieutenant Billy Jackson sat beside her, watching down along Broadway for an armored bus bringing journalists back to the hotel. They had been attending and presumably reporting on an official welcoming banquet for FATPO officers, hosted by the Portland Better Business Bureau and Chamber of Commerce. Annette had been concerned because by virtue of his prominence in the financial community, her father was one of the attendees. Don't worry, we're not going to hit the banquet, Jackson assured her. Not enough notice to scout the location properly, and the security would be too heavy. We have to be a lot more careful and prepare a lot more elaborately now whenever we do anything here in the city. with all these new Zog guns that can be brought to bear on us. Annette was now Mary Jones, according to the multiple items of ID in the purse in her handbag. She was wearing her black wig and much more makeup than she normally used, including eyeshadow and a bright lipstick, along with a sleeveless blouse with the top 3 buttons undone to reveal a black lace bra, and she wore a pair of hip-hugging jeans. They had let her select her own outfit. "Remember, you're a journalism student, and this is supposed to be a casual and unscripted encounter," Gary Bresler had told her before she went home to change. "I don't know if you have any slinky cocktail gowns or garments of that kind, but if you show up wearing something like that and dolled up to the nines, it might make Zucchino suspicious. He has to feel comfortable with you, comfortable enough to leave the shelter of his own herd in there in the Benson Hotel bar. Your attire should be understated, but sufficiently revealing to give him a preview of coming attractions, so to speak. Your manner when you interact with the target has to make it clear that you've got both the time and the inclination, and if he plays his cards right, he gets to nail a college girl tonight. It has to be believable from the get-go. Maybe if we can get Erica Collingwood assigned to 1st Brigade, she can give all our female comrades acting lessons," suggested Eric with a chuckle. "Actually, I'm sure something like that is in the works, although perhaps not for 1st Portland Brigade," said Jackson in complete seriousness. "One way or another, the Army will make use of Comrade Collingwood's undoubted talents." Annette was also wearing a large but not too ostentatious diamond engagement ring, which Stiggs provided. "It adds to your persona, since most men will assume that an attractive young woman is involved with someone, and may wonder why she isn't," Bresler had told her. "Media guys like Zucchino always fancy themselves as big studs, raffish James Bond international adventurer seducer types, and he'll probably consider an engagement ring a challenge." The final item in her ensemble for the evening was a small stainless steel, automatic in a Velcro holster on her right ankle. "I want you strapped," said Jackson. "Not just for self-defense, but because you may have to pull down on the target and hold him for us if things get hectic. That means that whatever happens, you do not enter the Benson Hotel with him, because you can't pass the metal detector. I've thought about it, and as important as this is, I simply can't justify sending you into a situation where you will not only be recorded on security digitals and lose your surface status, but where we will be powerless to help you or get you out of there if things go bad. If you can't get him to come with you to Patty Grogan's where there are no spy cameras, break it off and we'll figure out something else." "Sir, this may be very important," Annette told him seriously. "I think I should go with the flow wherever it leads. We need to find out if Captain Hatfield and his battalion are facing an imminent attack. I can lose the gun." "No, you can't," spoke up Eric firmly. "Annette, this is about as close as a volunteer gets to the enemy. You'll be in danger and you need something to fight with. At least hold them off long enough so we can get to you, if things go wrong." "Hang on to the gun for now," said Jackson, quickly thinking it over. "But I'll tell you what, take the holster off your ankle and stick it into your handbag. We'll figure out some way for you to ditch it if you decide to go into the Benson. Let's see how it plays out. We don't even know for sure that Zucchino's coming in on that bus. He may decide to give his fatty chaperone the slip and go off bar hopping or sleazing around on his own. Or I'll make it your call, comrade, but do not try to go through the metal detector with that piece. I'm sorry, but this is one of those tactical situations where I can't give you much in the way of specific orders or guidelines. Every one of these Lorelei tickles is different. I wish to hell we were able to plant a bug of some kind on you, like the police and FBI use, and sometimes we can, but this is short notice, and I couldn't round up the technical expertise and equipment we need, especially with our best tech guys down in Hollywood slaughtering movie stars. You're just jealous as hell because you didn't get picked for Task Force Director's Cut, said Bresler with a smile. Damn straight I am, admitted Jackson. All right, Becky, play it by ear, whatever happens, but just remember, General Order Number 8. If that little ping of warning goes off in your mind, listen to it and break contact. Now, in the fading light of the northwest summer evening, they saw the silver metallic armored tour bus lumbering up the street and pulling up. At a far corner, the actual front entrance to the Benson Hotel was barricaded by sandbags and several short concrete berms to keep car. Bombs at a distance. Slowly but surely, the Americans were learning the lessons of Baghdad, Beirut, and Belfast. A uniformed FATPO officer with a clipboard in his hand climbed onto the bus. Jackson turned to her. Looks like they're doing a roll call to make sure all their embedded media assets made it back, which gives us some time. It would appear they keep their reptiles on a short leash. Okay, you're up, Becky. You see where the van's parked? Passenger windows open, Tom and both things are in the back, but the cab is empty, because cops and fatties have finally figured out they need to watch for people sitting in parked vehicles. If you can get the target into Patty Grogan's, you keep the gun, and we'll move the van around and park it across the street. If not, if he'll only go for a drink with you in the Benson, see if you can toss the gun through the window without being seen as you walk by the van on the way inside. Fiddle around in your purse for a cigarette or something. If I light one up, he'll probably be able to tell I don't smoke, said Annette. Yeah, but they're handy for signaling, and when you need something tactile to fiddle with, replied Jackson. Not to mention as a weapon if things break bad suddenly. Try to light one if it looks like something's brewing, especially if you have to ditch the gun. Nothing like a lit cigarette in the eyeball to slow down an attacker. If for any reason you can't toss the gun through the window, or if he sees you with the piece and twigs to something going on, you'll be near the van and you'll have the guys right there. So that's when I call him a perv? Said Annette. Yeah, you yell, "Get your hands off me, you pervert," or something else containing the word pervert, loud enough for them to hear you inside the van. That's the signal for an emergency quick snatch. Then the things will jump out, grab him, and toss him in the back of the van. That will tip our hand, and they'll know he's been snatched. Which, like I said before, may kind of defeat the purpose. I'd rather do it later on and a bit further away when the streets are more empty, not right in front of a crowded hotel full of his buddies. But it's better than nothing. Once you get him in either bar setting, you need to take between 1 and 2 hours and pour as much booze as you can into him, while consuming as little as possible yourself. After 2 hours, we send in Tom to look for you, but see if you can cut it shorter than that. I don't want to hang around in this area any longer than necessary. It's infested with all kinds of Zog lowlife. What if Zucchino's busy, or else he doesn't like brunettes, and he just blows me off when I try to hit on him? Asked Annette anxiously. Jackson smiled. Comrade, trust me, no sexually normal man is going to blow off a come hither from you, and our information is that Zucchino is not gay. You got the signals for when you come outside with him? Handbag on my right shoulder means everything looks and feels copacetic, and you guys can make your grab. Handbag on left shoulder means I don't like the vibes and proceed with caution. Lighting a cigarette means there's trouble, and we all need to beat feet. Keep your cell phone on vibrate, said Jackson. If you detect anything at all that looks wrong or dangerous, you call me and give me the signal, and if we see anything hinky out here, we'll call you and give you the beat feet. Okay, they're debussing and heading for the hotel now. In fact, I think that's Zucchino there, in the raincoat. Remember to walk against the flow of foot traffic, not with it, so it's easier to bump into the target. Off you go. We'll be waiting. Good luck, comrade. Annette opened the door of the truck and got out, slipped across the street, and in a moment she was in among the throng of people getting off the bus. Jackson moved over into the passenger seat of the Tundra and got out directly onto the sidewalk so he could get a better view, carefully shielding himself behind a flight of stone steps rising up to a chic women's fashion boutique. As he had told Annette, it wasn't a good idea to be seen sitting in a parked vehicle in the vicinity of a place like the Benson Hotel, full of potential NVA targets. Annette saw the man she was after, wearing an open green raincoat, a yellow pastel shirt and loosened tie, and carrying a computer notebook on a strap over his shoulder. He seemed to be alone. As she passed him, she sidled into him very lightly, making him step aside to avoid her on the fairly crowded sidewalk. "Excuse me," she said. Then suddenly she gushed. "Oh my God, I know you! You're Dawson Zucchino." "Yeah, that's me," said Zucchino, glancing over her quickly from top to bottom. Annette was used to men undressing her with their eyes, but Zucchino practically ripped her clothes off in shreds with his eyes in a single second, and she knew instantly that she could hook him and reel him in so long as she stayed focused and played him right. "How did you know me?" he asked. "That photo in my column is pretty old. I'm a journalism major at PSU, and last week our professor did a whole hour class on your book appointment in Gaza, with some slides and film clips he got off the internet. The one showing you riding in on the tank and talking with that general what's-his-name. Professor David Michaels, you know him? He says you're the best and most fearless war correspondent ever to serve in the Middle East." Annette was taking a chance here, since it was possible Zucchino did know Michaels, but he simply smiled, took a bow, and said, "He's right on the money, of course. No, I don't know your professor, but I'm glad he's giving my book a plug." "Well, of course, I knew who you are anyway, even before that class. The Oregonian syndicates your column. You said a few weeks ago you were coming up here to Portland to cover the trouble, but I never thought I'd actually meet you. Gosh, I still can't believe it." "Well, here I am in the flesh," said Zucchino, spreading his arms. "Gee, I wish we could get you to come and talk to our class," said Annette eagerly. "Professor Michaels is good, and I don't mean any disrespect, but he hasn't actually worked on a paper in almost 15 years, and the profession has changed so much in that time. There's nothing like talking to someone who's actually working in print media." "You mean you want to get into print?" asked Zucchino in feigned surprise. "With your looks, I would have thought you'd want to get into television news and reporting. You've got anchorwoman written all over you." "Oh, wow, thanks," giggled Annette, managing to blush. "But everybody wants to get into TV news. I want to be a good old-fashioned reporter. Lois Lane kind of thing, you know?" "I'll have to come to work for your paper," said Zucchino, frankly ogling her now. "I'll use the name Clark Kent, of course." Annette giggled again and stuck out her hand, shaking his. "Speaking of names, I'm Mary," she said. "Mary Jones." "Oh gosh, I'm sure you have to be somewhere, but I really would like to sit down and talk to you sometime about, the job, the life, and stuff." A short Portland block away, Jackson speed-dialed a number on his phone. It vibrated inside the darkened blue van. "Target engaged," he said briefly. "Well, Mary, no time like the present," said Zucchino. "First word of advice, it's not all glamour. A lot of the stuff you have to cover is about as exciting as watching paint dry, and you have to apply generous amounts of lipstick to a lot of pigs. Good example tonight, I've just come from an incredibly boring formal dinner replete with rubber chicken and cheap champagne that I must now write up in 500 words that will grip and fascinate the 50 million or so people who read my column in syndication and inspire them to continue the fight against racism and terrorism. I was about to fortify myself for the task of putting some lipstick on this pig with a drink or five. How about you come into the hotel with me, and we can find a table off in a corner and—" "Bringing in a guest, Dawson?" Annette turned and saw a handsome and tough-looking young man with a buzz cut, wearing a blue blazer with an insignia she didn't recognize, and a polo shirt underneath with a Christian Broadcasting Network logo on it. She also saw the butt of a Glock automatic in a shoulder holster beneath the open jacket. "Hi, I'm Mary Jones," she gushed. "Are you a reporter too?" "No, Perry here is the voice of my conscience," said Zucchino in a dry tone. "He's my security buddy. Is that like a security blanket?" asked Annette innocently. "Very similar, yes," said Zucchino. "He's a private consultant, hired gunman, from Blackwater Corporation. His job is to make sure I don't get blown up or abducted by the NVA and tortured to make me reveal all my many military secrets." Annette's heart almost stopped, but before she could say anything, Perry spoke to her with a humorless grin stretching his lips. "Actually, Dawson is being his usual dramatic self. His newspaper and the other employers of journalists and media people who are covering the white supremacist terror situation here in the Northwest have retained our company to make sure nothing happens to them, thus relieving the police and the FATPO to do their main job of eradicating these neo-Nazi vermin who have dared to raise their bloody hands against the apple of God's eye. We use the term security buddy. Dawson and the others find us amusing, I'm sure, and sometimes a little annoying, no doubt. But one of these days we may just end up taking a bullet for them, and perhaps then they'll find us somewhat less of a subject for humor. Dawson, you need to come in off the street now. If you want to bring this, young lady in with you, then you know she'll have to go through the usual security checks." "Anything else you can think of to try and scare her off, Perry?" asked Zucchino in irritation. "Like maybe telling her I've got leprosy?" Down the block, Jackson spoke into his phone. "They've picked up a bogey. Get ready. She may yell pervert, and if she does, you'll need to cack that gun thug in the blue jacket." "I see him," came a voice in Jackson's ear. "You need to get in off the street, Dawson," repeated Perry calmly. "You're asking for a drive-by out here." Okay, I'm coming," said Zucchino, waving the mercenary away. "Don't be too long," said Perry. "If I have to come out here again, I'll have to file an incident report. You have enough of those already on file." He turned and walked toward the front entrance. "Jesus, I hate being embedded," Zucchino said with a curse. It's like being in some rich boarding school with hall monitors. Everybody marching to and fro in single file, a curfew and a bed check, sometimes literally. Come on in and have a drink and meet some of the other correspondents, Mary. Never mind the security checks, it's just routine. You go through a metal detector and you have to show ID and sign in, that's all. Is that guy with the gun gonna be following me around and listening in to us the whole night? Asked Annette warily. Yeah, I hate to say it, but probably so, sighed Zucchino. Perry's a jackass, a religious nut, one of those weirded out 700 Club types who volunteered for repeated tours in Iraq and Gaza because he thinks Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy and we have to have a nuclear war over there so Jesus will come back, you get the idea. But the government insists we have him and his buddies all over us, and so do all our respective bosses. He's a self-appointed guardian of our morals, which I suspect you've been around journalists enough even as a student to understand is a pretty tall order. That nutcase thinks it's a sin for anyone to hold hands with a woman before they're married, and even though he's also against alcohol, he hovers and looms over us in the bar with a ginger ale in his hand, like that little goody two-shoes kid we all remember from school who was always telling the teacher on other kids. He makes it damned hard to score. Suddenly he realized what he'd said and he tried to recover. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, I really would like to introduce you to some real working journalists. I wasn't implying that you... Annette laughed merrily. That's okay. I don't mind older guys hitting on me. Boys my age are still pretty immature, still boys if you get my drift. But couldn't we go somewhere else? I was actually on my way to Patty Grogan's Shamrock Pub down the street here. See, I just turned 21, and I haven't been to many clubs or bars and such. At that moment, providentially, there came a wild burst of Irish uilleann pipe and fiddle music from the distant glowing facade of Patty Grogan's. See, that's why I was going to Patty's. They've got Clan Malone live there tonight, and I love Irish trad music. Always have ever since I heard Enya when I was 10. Would you really get in trouble with that character if we went there? Fuck Perry, said Zucchino succinctly. You've loved Irish music since you were 10, and I've loved Guinness since I was 10. Although to do the black stuff justice, you really need to be supping it in some little dark pub in Dublin only a few streets away from St. James's Gate. Doesn't travel well. Paddy Grogan's it is, and that moron can write me up all he wants. We better go before he comes back out again, whispered Annette conspiratorially, hooking her arm into his, and at the same time casually shifting her handbag from her right shoulder to her left. That's the warning signal, said Jackson into the phone. She doesn't like the vibes, probably that blue boy's showing too much interest. Want to risk calling her? Said the voice in his ear. My guess is that Goon got suspicious, looked at her too close, but he went back inside. Wait, they're moving off down the street toward the Irish pub. Good girl, damn good girl. She's cut him out from the herd. So we reposition outside location 2? Asked the voice. Jackson looked up and down the street. Traffic was light, the evening rush hour was over, and the downtown clubbers and restaurant goers hadn't arrived on the scene yet. Jackson communed briefly with his gut and his antennae. They took a roll call earlier on the bus, so they're keeping closer tabs on these media jerks than we thought. They're going to notice if he doesn't return to the hotel. Fuck it. Let's pick him up now, before they come looking for him. Move down and park in front of Patty Grogan's, but on the right-hand side, not across the street. I'll come in from behind. Becky's a smart kid. She'll pick up on what we're doing. Zucchino and Annette strolled down the sidewalk arm in arm toward the door of the pub with the Irish music spilling out into the street, and the reporter was already into what Annette presumed was his standard opening monologue for putting the moves on starry-eyed female. Journalism majors, an art in which he seemed quite practiced. My God, this idiot really doesn't have a clue, does he? She thought as she walked beside him with a silly grin on her face. It hasn't even occurred to him to wonder how I just popped up beside him. Is it just American hubris, or is he really that stupid? She saw the van slide up in front of the pub, and she understood that Jackson had decided to make his move early, which was fine with her. Great! Now I don't have to watch this asshole get drunk for 2 hours and try to slide his hand under my blouse. Jackson pulled the Tundra up to the curb a couple of spaces behind the van, quietly got out and fell in behind them. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Annette could hear him speaking out loud behind her. "Hey dudes, I'm downtown just heading into Patty Grogan's. You guys get your asses in gear and let's party down." The rear doors of the van flew open, and two men in ski masks jumped out. "What the?" gasped Zucchino, but before he could say anything else, Annette shoved him off the sidewalk and into the waiting arms of the two volunteers. Jackson ran past her, slugged Zucchino viciously in the kidneys, followed up with a rabbit punch, and then the other two picked him up bodily and hurled him into the van. The two masked men jumped in after him and slammed the doors shut. Annette couldn't tell if one of them was Eric or if Eric was driving. The van pulled away from the curb smoothly and easily. "Come on," said Jackson. They both jumped in the Tundra and Jackson pulled out, following the van. Annette slid down as far as she could in the passenger seat, pulled off the black wig, shucked off her blouse and pulled a dark blue sweater over her head, then pulled a baseball cap over her blonde hair. She quickly wiped the makeup off her face with a towelette. When she sat up, her appearance was pretty well altered. The whole thing had taken place in a matter of seconds, and when Jackson checked his rearview mirror, there was no sign of any pursuit. He put a police scanner onto his dashboard and turned it on, but he heard no unusual chatter on the FATPO frequency. He called the van and spoke briefly. "They've got him restrained," he told Annette. "I need to follow them for a while to make sure they won't need any interference run, but we'll pull over in a bit. You and Tom can get out and catch a bus back to where you left your car." "Sir, I'd like to come along if that's permissible," said Annette. "I might be able to help." "I doubt it," said Jackson, looking at her. "You sure? It's not going to be very pleasant. You might see and hear some things you don't want to." "My dad always told me never to do anything if I couldn't live with the consequences," said Annette. "I need to follow through, sir. I think it's a necessary part of my training." Jackson flipped open his phone. "Let me talk to Tom." "Yeah, Tom, Becky wants to stick with us for the sociable part of the evening so she won't need a ride home. How about you?" "Your call." "I'll tell you what I told her. It ain't gonna be sweetness and light. I can put you outside watching the vehicles if you want." He was silent for a moment. "That's what I thought you'd say. Okay, see you there." There turned out to be a large garage bay in a self-storage facility in McMinnville. They were met by a man in overalls who had a few whispered words with the lieutenant. "Give us a ring on the bell if anyone shows up who's got no business here," Annette heard Jackson tell him. "Come on." They got out of the truck and Eric Sellers got out of the driver's side of the van. Jackson opened the side door into the large room with a key. He turned on the lights, and Annette and Eric saw that the walls and ceiling had been fitted with cardboard egg cartons, nailed tightly together like tiles. "Soundproofing," he told them. He went to one corner and pulled out a folding table, which he set up in the middle of the room. He placed a metal folding chair on one side and a much heavier old-fashioned wooden chair with armrests on the other side. Jackson then took a large work light on a stand, plugged it in, and brought it to just behind the metal chair. He then went over to a large metal shelving unit standing along one wall and looked over several items on the shelf. Then he went over to Annette and Eric. "All right, you know why we brought this man here," Jackson told them. "He may or may not have information involving the Army's mission and the lives of our comrades. One of the first rules of cross-examination in a court of law is never ask a question to which you do not already know the answer. But this isn't a courtroom, and we don't know the answer. We don't even know if there is one, or if he was just blowing smoke in the ear of a woman as amoral as himself, as part of one of these people's sad little mating rituals. But we will never admit this to him at any time during the forthcoming process. One of the rules is never take 'I don't know' for an answer. Everybody knows something, even if they don't know they know it. We have to find out what he knows, all of what he knows, and we have to do it fast. This falls into the ticking time bomb category. If he refuses to tell us what he knows, or if he is obviously lying, then we must compel him to speak. That does not mean just beating the crap out of him, or cutting off his ears just for the hell of it, or going medieval on his ass just because we don't like him. Our objective here is to force him to tell us what he knows. Nothing more and nothing less. I will use only such force as I deem necessary, and since so far as we know he's no worse than most of his kind and not as bad as some, my intention at this moment is eventually to release him alive, after his information checks out and when it seems safe to do so." Annette gave a little sigh. "Does that relieve your mind, Becky?" "Yes, sir, it does," she admitted. "There is no shame in that," said Jackson gently. "You're a soldier. and your duty demands that you have to do crappy things sometimes. There's no law that says you have to like it. To continue, the secret to getting information quickly is not torture, but the fear of torture, with Americans anyway. Muslims are a different story. The CIA, Mossad, Blackwater, and others do really vile things to Muslim prisoners. But Muslims have a genuine faith in their God and a pride in their nation and their heritage that allows them to withstand techniques that would send an American mad in a matter of seconds. Americans can dish it out, but they can't take it. Although there are some individual exceptions, such as certain white military officers who still hold to the old code of honor, on the whole Americans are very soft and weak, both in body and in character, especially media people. I'm not anticipating too much trouble with Mr. Zucchino tonight. He may turn out to be one of the exceptions, but I rather doubt it. You'd think that Americans' weakness would make them easy subjects, but actually it's rather the reverse. They're too fragile and brittle. They break easily, but they don't just break, they shatter. Pain literally sends them out of their mind in hysterics or into a kind of fugue state, and it becomes impossible to get anything out of them. I remember when we first met, you said if we were ever captured, all the Army asks for is 24 hours, Eric reminded him. That's correct, agreed Jackson. Although I'm proud to say that many of our captured comrades have held out much longer than that. The best way to do this with someone like Zucchino is to hurt him just enough so his mind can anticipate much worse, terrify him to the point where he will do anything to avoid more pain. There are in fact certain things we won't do, or at least I won't do. Sexual stuff, rape or threats of rape against women or sodomy against men. Threats of stripping them and showing them naked on the internet, that kind of crap. That is what Americans do to their captives in their prisons, not us. We are better than that. Or at least the volunteers under my command are. I don't like some of these stories I've been hearing out of Idaho about O.C. Ogilvy's crew. But sometimes we have to make a prisoner think we might do it. I mention this because whatever you hear me say tonight, you have to bear in mind why I'm saying it. What if this guy decides to hang tough and he just plain won't tell us, Jack? Asked Eric. Then we hurt him, said Jackson. Okay, the prisoner will be restrained in the wooden chair there. I will be seated in the metal chair. I will do the actual interrogation. I will be smoking cigarettes, which is something I normally don't do, but not only can they be handy to make a point with, but smoke in a prisoner's nose and face and lungs increases his discomfort, especially when he is gagged. Jackson walked over to the shelf and picked up some dark woolen blobs. Here are some extra masks. Wear them. I don't want him getting a look at anyone's face but mine. Becky, you stand over here in the corner and maintain complete silence. I'd rather he not even see you. It could be this idiot hasn't even figured out you set him up, and if so, I'd like to keep it that way, so you will say nothing during the entire procedure. Just observe. If it looks like it's going to go on for a long time, I want you both to leave, take the Tundra and get back to your car, because you guys are still on the surface, and I don't want you gone for too long or your time unaccounted for. Our folks think we spend our evenings in a no-tell motel or some kind of love nest on campus, explained Eric. But they worry about us, and they ask that we both make sure we're home by midnight. Well, no need to disturb them on account of this piece of journalistic dog shit. Tom, you stand behind him, sort of looming, so he'll know you're there, but you let me, or when necessary, one of the things do the talking. Observe and learn. Both of you may have to do this yourselves one day, as awful as that sounds. Let's go get our guest of honor. A few minutes later, Dawson Zucchino was sitting in the wooden chair, his torso stripped to his t-shirt, his arms strapped to the rests with plastic ties and his legs melded to the legs of the chair by heavy Velcro cuffs. His mouth was sealed with duct tape. His eyes were bulging and staring in terror. 3 masked men loomed behind him. Zucchino turned his head and strained his neck, trying to see them. Jackson sat in front of him at the table, the standing light behind him aimed right in the bound man's face. He calmly lit a cigarette and plunked the pack down on the table. Jackson spoke. His voice was quiet and conversational. Mr. Zucchino, my name is Lieutenant William Jackson of the Northwest Volunteer Army. I am the commander of a company, 1st Portland Brigade. Did you pay attention enough in your briefings, or whatever the hell they gave you, so that you recognize me? Zucchino nodded. Good. That will save us some time, since you already know that I am not a nice man. I think you can guess why you are here. You have some information regarding impending events in Clatsop County, Oregon, which you are going to share with us. Information regarding those 1,000 or so FATPO gun thugs who have been sitting on their asses down there in Oakland. Information regarding the current whereabouts and intentions of a blue gum nigger named Rollins. Before I give you the floor, I should warn you that I do not want to hear any crap coming out of your mouth about how we can't do this to you, yada yada yada. This isn't your country, it is ours. Your people do not rule here any longer. We do, and we can, and we will do any damned thing we want to you. Are you quite clear on this? Zucchino simply stared in horror over his duct-taped mouth. One of the things reached down and twisted Zucchino's ears savagely, making him bawl weirdly through the duct tape. "Your ears working, asshole?" said the thing. "You're not answering the lieutenant, so I guess they ain't working. Let me adjust them for you." He twisted the other ear and Zucchino jerked and writhed and moofed and mooed. "Did you understand what I just said to you, Mr. Zucchino? Nod your head, please," Jackson repeated politely. Zucchino nodded his head wildly. "Good. Now, the second thing you need to understand is that you will tell us every single last scrap of information and knowledge you have about an impending federal attack on the Astoria, Oregon area. Lying to us, withholding information from us, trying to play us or deceive us is not an option here. Before you attempt any such game playing, you need to ask yourself, would you be here if we didn't already know something? Something about the fatties and something about you. This is the deal. Very simple, no mystery here. I'm going to take that tape off, and you are going to tell me everything, let me repeat that, everything you know about this coming invasion of our country by a horde of American scum, and every word of it will be God's diamond truth. If you do that, and we confirm that you have told us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, then you will eventually find yourself back in Los Angeles in your cubicle or whatever, in front of your computer, tapping away at a string of lies about your long ordeal of horror at the hands of the dreaded NVA. You might even win a Pulitzer Prize and go on the talk show circuit. If you lie to us in the slightest respect, then someday, perhaps 20 or 50 or 100 years from now, in the Northwest American Republic of the future, some farmer or hunter or park ranger is going to unearth the remains of a rotting skeleton from a hole in the ground way out in the woods, and you will end up lying in a plastic storage tray in some basement marked unidentified remains, possibly from War of Independence, until somebody finally decides your bones are taking up too much space and throws them away. Are you internalizing all this, Mr. Zucchino? Zucchino was shaking like he had the ague, but he nodded. Jackson in turn nodded, and one of the masked things ripped the duct tape from the prisoner's mouth. The other thing moved away, and Eric stepped up to take his place beside the bound man in the chair. The thing went over to the metal shelf and took down two objects resting there. One was a flat block of green wood with a curved blade on a hinge attached to the side, a simple school or office paper cutter. He handed it to Jackson, who placed it on the table. The second was a nozzle with a pistol grip, and below the trigger hung a small blue plastic bottle of propane. Jackson handed the thing his lighter, and the thing turned on the nozzle and lit the flame with the flint lighter, which he then refined into a long blue pencil of heat. Zucchino stared. "Sweet Jesus, what are you going to do to me?" he mewled in a cringing voice. Jackson nodded at the hand torch. "FBI and Homeland Security use those puppies to castrate men," he said conversationally. "Did you know that? Burn right through the scrotum and penis if they want it done quick, but usually they simply burn the genitalia off slowly. They call it a weenie roast, or sometimes chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Don't worry, we're not quite so uncivilized as that." "I saw him do that in Iraq," rumbled the thing with the torch. "More'n once. I figured on toasting your nuts for you, you lying sack of shit. But the Mr. Jackson here wants to be gentlemanly about it." "And how do you use something like that in a gentlemanly way?" gasped Zucchino, his journalistic training feebly reasserting itself even through his terror. "We're going to use it to cauterize the stumps on your hands after we cut off your fingers one by one. Should you try lying to us?" said Jackson, lifting the blade on the guillotine suggestively. "We can't have you bleeding to death before we finish our conversation. You may yet have to dictate your Pulitzer-winning article about your experiences this evening to somebody who still has opposing thumbs, but at least you'll still have your family jewels. Can't say fairer than that, can I?" "Yeah, well, I suppose I better be thankful for small favors," said Zucchino with a hysterical little giggle. Gotta get more pussy, although I think I'll take a pass on that bitch you threw at me tonight. Eric Sellers didn't stop to think that he was disobeying his orders to remain a spectator. He stepped forward, and with one powerful right hook, he pulverized Zucchino's mouth and many of the teeth in it. The bound man's head snapped back with a deep groan, and blood oozed from between his lips in a crimson drool. "I hope you didn't break his damned jaw," snapped Jackson. "How the hell is he supposed to talk with no functioning mouth?" "Sorry, sir, I just," muttered Eric, stunned himself. The second thing leaned over and said in a low tone, "We push his buttons, kid. You never let him push yours. Don't do anything like that again unless I tell you to," Jackson ordered Eric. "Throw me one of those rags." The thing with the glowing hand torch pulled a long, greasy rag off the shelf and tossed it to Jackson, who wiped Zucchino's mouth with it. "You'll live, although not long if you don't keep a civil tongue in your head," he told Zucchino grimly. "This young comrade took exception to your language, turd. For that matter, so did I." He leaned over the table and shoved the lit cigarette in his hand into Zucchino's left ear. The resulting shriek of mortal agony seemed to shake the roof. Eric understood the need for the egg carton soundproofing now. Jackson walked around the table and grabbed Zucchino by the collar. He leaned down to the wounded man's right ear. "You need that mouth to speak with, but you only need one ear to hear with. Now you listen to me. Our female volunteers are the jewels in the crown of the Aryan race. We never speak disrespectfully of them, and garbage like you damn sure never does. Zack Hatfield is another jewel in our crown, one of the finest and bravest men I've ever known, and the volunteers with him are our flowers of the forest. They are men. You are not. You are a rodent. I will not allow you to harm them by withholding information about this evil tyranny's plots against them. You are going to tell me now, tell it all, or your hands will become nothing but charred stumps. And then we'll start on your toes." "Please, please," mumbled Zucchino through his shattered mouth. Jackson ignored him, whipped out a pocket knife, and cut the plastic ties holding Zucchino's right arm and wrist bound to the chair, and jerked his hand forward onto the table, pulling out his limp little finger and placing it on the green wood beneath the raised blade of the guillotine, holding it there by force. "I will count to 3, said Jackson. 1, 2, no. Oh God, no, please don't. I'll tell you everything, screamed Zucchino in hideous fear. Yes, it's true. The FATPO is coming up from California, and they're going to land in force and secure that big bridge. The government is scared the NVA will take it over or blow it up, choke off the Columbia River. Rolly Rollins himself will be in command." "How do you know this?" demanded Jackson. "I was supposed to go with the press party to cover the story. It took my editor a month of schmoozing Rollins to get me in." "They had a press briefing and told you all of their plans?" said Jackson skeptically. "No, I just picked it all up. Those guys in FATPO have room temperature IQs on a good day, and I doubt some of them can even comprehend the meaning of the word secret. A bunch of us were supposed to leave for California real late tonight. Secret military transport plane, all hush-hush," gasped Zucchino. "When are they coming?" shouted Jackson. "They're supposed to land on the morning of the 30th around dawn," moaned Zucchino in a broken voice. "Please don't cut off my finger. Oh God, my ear hurts." "Yeah, that's 2 days from now," exclaimed Eric. Jackson slapped Zucchino hard. "Stop blubbering, turd. How are they coming? Airplane? Helicopter? Truck convoy up 101? By ship? What?" "By ship," groaned Zucchino. "They got some old ferries and cruise ships they've rigged up as troop transports, and they're going to have a Navy escort. They'll also have chopper cover, flying down from Fort Lewis." "I don't believe you," growled Jackson. "You must not know much about Oregon geography or history, asshole. Ever hear of the Graveyard of the Pacific? There's no way they could land an invasion fleet in Astoria like that, because they'd have to cross the Columbia River bar to do it, which means they'd have to get a skilled bar pilot on every ship, and it would take days to get them all in. Plus they'd have to sail single file under the bridge within easy small arms range of shore. Even a nigger isn't stupid enough to do that." He lifted the blade of the guillotine over the hapless Zucchino's finger. "Not Astoria," shrieked Zucchino. "Down the shore. They're landing down the shore miles away, past Warrenton, big open place called Sunset Beach. Trucks and armored cars and all. They're going to do it like the Marines landing on Okinawa, guys in full gear splashing through the surf, Rollins stepping on shore like MacArthur. All for the rolling TV cameras. You know, like they did in Somalia and in '92. I swear I'm telling you the truth. Please, not my finger. Later on, Jackson and Eric and Annette stood outside in the dark while the things pulled away in the van with Zucchino trussed up like a chicken in the back. They'll keep him on ice until after this checks out, said Jackson. Trouble is, 2 days. That's time enough for somebody to miss him. And they might figure out we took him and cracked him and we know about Sunset Beach. Zog may well change their plans. This still may turn out to have been all for nothing. Sir, I apologize for my losing it in there, began Eric. Yeah, all's well that ends well. Me or the things would have had to open him up by giving him a good pop anyway, said Jackson. You were provoked. Nice gesture, Sir Lancelot, said Annette with a giggle. I appreciate it. That Blackwater mercenary looking you over at close quarters bothers me, Jackson told her. I wonder if we shouldn't get you two out of the way for a bit. Maybe detach duty down in Clatsop with 3rd Battalion, sir? Asked Eric eagerly. Maybe, but I hope it doesn't come to that, said Jackson. I'd like to keep you out of the frying pan, but not drop you into the fire. After tonight, you're even more valuable to a company than you have been in your intelligence function. I'm actually getting a bit worried that when Oscar gets back from, well, where he is now, he might try to headhunt you for 3rd Section. Would you be too pissed off if I said I'd love to try that, sir? Asked Annette meekly. I'll hang on to you as long as I can, but the big picture has to come first, said Jackson. If you end up going with Oscar, that's the way it goes. As to Clatsop, don't worry, guys. Before this is over, there will be more than enough war to go around. You'll see your share. Hello there, said Julia, startled and nonplussed. Now that she had found Zack, she was at a loss what to say to him. How did you get in here? Your mom let me in, of course, Hatfield told her. She's cool, and she always liked me, remember. I had to promise to let you two get caught up on all the mushy mother-daughter stuff before I made my appearance, though, and I am under stern maternal admonition to behave myself and not upset you. I got word you were coming. From that guy Wally? Asked Julia. Yes, but we knew you were coming up from California before that, Hatfield told her. I got a call telling me to be expecting you. Should I ask how you found that out? No, said Hatfield, shaking his head. You're looking real good, Julie. I'd tell you that you haven't changed a bit, but you have. For the better. You look just awful, she replied helplessly. Nothing definite, nothing physical. Older, of course, but that's not it. I couldn't tell you what it is, but you look like you're 1,000 years old, Zack. Yeah, well, 4 of those 1,000 years were in Iraq. That'll do it, replied Hatfield grimly. Plus the past few years with the Northwest Volunteers. I'm not surprised I'm showing some mileage. I won't ask you what you've been doing with yourself, because I'm afraid I already know, said Julia. And I won't ask you how you've been, because I know that as well. I heard about your visit from the FBI. As ludicrously inadequate as this sounds, I'm sorry, Julia. If it's any consolation to you, we'll most likely get the bastards one day. My God, you must have quite a spy system down there, said Julia. Is there anything you don't know? Yes, we have quite a spy system down there, but actually I learned about your Phoebe encounter from the internet. HollywoodGossip.com, to be exact. Beautiful, said Julia with a laugh, sitting down on her bed in bemusement. Then I suppose you know why I've come? She asked. In a general way, yes, although I admit I'm very keen on hearing the details from you personally, Hatfield told her. I told those characters down there in Hollywood who sent me up here that I wasn't sure whether or not you'd shoot me when you saw me, knowing who I'd come from, said Julia. I suppose I should be worried right now, but I find I can't seem to gin it up. It's you, after all. Yeah, it's me, said Zack with a quiet smile. And no, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to shoot you. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, do you want me to make my pitch now? She inquired. Or will I be conducted blindfolded to a secret meeting in a warehouse or a cave, and make my presentation to a long table full of masked men sitting beneath a big Nazi flag? I'm not just being sarcastic, really. I genuinely have no idea how you people operate or what to expect. Well, like I said, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, just out of curiosity. But in fact, I don't have the authority to agree to anything along the lines of what I think you want to propose to us, Hatfield explained. I'm just a field commander with a specific area of responsibility, and I don't have anything to do with Task Force Director's Cut or Operation We Are Not Amused. With what? She asked. We called this particular campaign Operation We Are Not Amused, and the team we assigned to carry it out is codenamed Task Force Director's Cut, because we're cutting down a lot of directors. A little Nazi humor for you there. Very little, said Julia archly. Anyway, whenever you're ready, I will introduce you to a comrade from the Army Council, and you and he can bat the breeze, with me present or without, as you best feel comfortable doing. Then we give Wally Post a ring and back you go up the river, and we'll see what develops from there. I'm sure I shouldn't ask this, but that guy Wally seems to be very knowledgeable about you, and what's going on up here. Is he one of you, or is he one of them? Wally's a type of character who historically flourishes in situations like this. A guy who plays both ends against the middle and sees how much cash he can pick up from both sides, Zack told her. After the war, we'll weigh him in the balance, and if he sums up more on our side, we'll give him a medal. If he weighs up more on their side, we'll shoot him. Oh my God, you really think you're going to win, she said softly, shaking her head in wonderment. As it happens, I do, yes, said Zack. I wasn't sure at first, but now I am. You weren't sure at first? She exclaimed. Then why, Zack? I suppose in one sense that's what I've come all this way to ask you. Why? Because it is right, Hatfield told her quietly. At first it was because a situation developed with a friend of mine, someone you used to know as well, where it was the only thing I could do and still live with myself. But I would have ended up with the Army anyway, Julie, because it is right. I won't go into it any further than that because I'm not sure you'd understand. I'm not being patronizing, I really don't think you would. No offense, but you don't have the right background for it. Until a few months ago, everything in your life was going right, or as right as it ever does for anyone in this mess. You had a good and somewhat glamorous job, you had a place in Zog's scheme of things and all the little perks and luxuries that came with that. You were an insider. You conformed, and the system rewarded you for that conformity, so I really don't think you could understand what it's like to be on the outside looking in, and knowing that because of your skin color and your gender you would never ever be allowed in, always shut out of a land and a world that your own ancestors created. We're taking it back, Julie. Some of it anyway. Leaving aside my life, which believe me isn't quite as wonderful and fulfilling as you seem to think, then that's what this is all about? The have-nots are revolting against the haves? That's a very oversimplified way of putting it, but yes, I suppose that's what most revolutions are about in the final analysis. The kicker is that in this case, the haves happen to be truly evil, and the have-nots have been for real robbed of everything that is rightfully theirs. Look, Julie, this is the first time I've seen you in over 10 years, and I don't want to spoil things by standing up and delivering a political polemic, he told her earnestly. Astoria High, me playing football and you cheerleading and then cruising Marine Boulevard afterward trying to get Ted to buy beer for us and the gang, all that's long gone. You're the woman you became, and I am the man that Iraq and America made me, so let's just leave it at that, okay? How have you been, Julie? I mean, really, are you happy? The bright city lights still bright? Is everything down there turning out for you like you thought it would? God, you sound like my mother, laughed Julia. I just went through that whole recital with her downstairs over supper. Next, I suppose you'll be inquiring delicately whether there's a young man in my life? Is there? Blurted Zack. Sorry, Jules, that was out of line. I mean, I heard about that actor. Julia shook her head. I'd rather not talk about him, if you don't mind. Not being rude or putting you in your place or anything, Zack, don't get me wrong. In a sense, I know you have the right to be interested, even if it was 14 years ago with us. It's just that was a pretty near miss, and I still can't believe I was stupid enough to almost get dragged into the cheapest and most trite Hollywood drug drama you can imagine. God, I was almost a complete idiot. Yeah, but you spotted the ambush and you E&E'd in time, laughed Zack. Huh? She said. I don't get it. NVA inside joke. Oh, well, basically, yeah, other than the fact that there don't seem to be any worthwhile men for mating purposes in the business, you're right. Up until you guys rained on my parade and got me involved with the FBI because of our few nights of adolescent passion all those years ago. It's been pretty good, she told him. You mind my asking something? How in God's name did you get a bankable like Erica Collingwood to join your group and throw away everything she's got. I admit it, that really threw me for a loop. How the hell would I know? Asked Zack, laughing and shrugging. I'm just a grunt, basically. That sounds like third section stuff. Third section? Asked Julia. The NVA's cloak and dagger boys and girls. All I can tell you, Julia, is that each individual's motivation for joining the volunteers is different, but the same. Infinite variations on the same theme. You get to a point where you have just plain had enough. You're not going to take all this American bullshit anymore. Look, we'd best get back to business. When do you want to get together with this guy from the Army Council? As soon as possible, said Julia. No offense, Zack, but I'd kind of like to get this done and get out of here. I'm bordering on a major league freakout as it is. No time like the present, said Zack. He flipped open his cell phone and hit a speed dial. Yeah, Mr. Barron, you want to come and take a look at those plans now, or wait until tomorrow? He listened briefly. Okay, see you in a bit. He hung up. He'll come over. He had some other stuff to do in the area anyway. Zack, this is my mom's house, said Julia uneasily. Don't you even try to tell me that my own mother is in on this terrorist thing with you guys. No, she's not. She just remembers me from the old days and she always thought, well, anyway, she always thought I should have waited for you, sighed Julia. Yes, Zack, I know. She's mentioned that. On more than one occasion, actually. I've tried to explain to her that it wasn't your fault, that when we first arrived in Iraq we were promised rotation every 15 months, and I ended up staying there for 4 years, said Hatfield. And the only way I got out, even after 4 years, was when my leg was shredded. No one in his right mind would expect you to wait that long for something that might never have happened. I didn't. Julia, I don't know if you've ever worried about it, but I want you to know, we're cool. On that, anyway, whatever you may think of me now. Yes, Zack, I have worried about it, and I'm glad to hear you say that, she replied. Julie, her mother called up the stairs. Ted's here. Oh, Jesus! Cried Julia in sudden panic. I forgot she said she was going to call Ted. Let me go down and then when we're in the living room you can sneak down the back stairs and out the rear door. No need, laughed Zack, picking up his Winchester and his hat with the feather. Ted and I see each other on a regular basis. We have to— The hell you say? Gasped Julia. Oh, come on now. I will not believe that my brother is one of your gang. No, he isn't, Zack assured her. He's a brave and decent man who has found himself in an impossible situation and who does his best to do his duty in spite of it. I give him all the help I can, although I have to admit there have been some strained moments. But for the past 3 years, not one local law enforcement officer in Clatsop County has been killed by the NVA. And in view of what's been going on in the rest of the Northwest since 10/22, that's a hell of an accomplishment, and one he and you should be proud of. Julia descended the stairs and found her brother waiting for her in the living room, apparently just come from work since he was wearing his sheriff's uniform. He looked tired. He had aged in a way somewhat different from Zack, and Julia was suddenly very glad to see him indeed, for it struck her what his position in all this must be like and how dangerous life for him had become. They hugged fiercely. Ted looked up and saw Hatfield standing in the doorway behind her, and he nodded briefly. Zack, he said. Hey, Ted, replied Hatfield. Lear looked at his sister. Julie, you know I am more glad to see you again than I can say, but I have to admit, I'm kind of disturbed by some things Zack has been telling me. I've been thankful these past years that you've been safely out of all this. Down there living your own life in California. Now it seems you've managed to get involved in all this crap up here anyway, and on a dangerous level. Jesus, kid, you're playing with fire here. Are you nuts? Are you? You seem to have been involved as well, pointed out Julia. Look, Ted, I'm not criticizing, but you're supposed to be the sheriff up here, and I gather you've been turning a blind eye toward— She gestured toward Hatfield. What the hell's going on, Ted? Lear sighed. It's kind of confusing, Julie. I'm not sure I understand it myself sometimes, but a while ago I had to sit down and do some serious thinking. I had to make a decision as to whether my loyalty was to this community, these people here we grew up with, this place, our home, or to a government 3,000 miles away that doesn't care about us, to an empire that never did anything for us except to take our young people for their army and flood our land with foreigners, because it put money in the pockets of men in suits. Men so filthy rich already that they didn't need what little they took from us, but they took it anyway because they could. I decided to do what I originally gave my oath to do, to protect and serve the people of Clatsop County, Oregon, not fight a war against some of them in the name of a bad and failed government. This hasn't been easy, but I was lucky in that Zack and I go back a ways, and I could deal with him and talk to him, and work out ways to cushion the people in this county from all this horror. Sometimes, anyway. I wasn't judging you. It's just that I find all of this so hard to understand, said Julia, shaking her head. So what the hell is this you've gotten involved in? Demanded Ted. Maybe something like what you're doing up here, Julia told him. I'm here to try and stop some of the killing if I can. You've heard what's happening down in Los Angeles to the film and entertainment community? I've heard, said Lear grimly. The media says some of that's Cat Lockhart's doing. They found his calling card on Oscar night, so I gather. I have selfish reasons for being here, Ted, I admit that. They blacklisted me and made it so I could never work again. Who's they, Julia? Asked Hatfield quietly. I know you know Ted knows, but I'm really curious to see if you can bring yourself to say the word. All right, if you insist, the Jews blacklisted me. Snapped Julia. And I would never ever have said that if you guys hadn't forced the whole issue to, with your guns and your bombs. Bingo, chuckled Zack. That is exactly one of the reasons we revolted. Even if we lose and we're all wiped out, the Jews won't ever be able to hide and pretend they're just like other people, ever again. We've outed the bastards for good, and all— She turned back to her brother. But as corny as this sounds, Ted, I really do want to stop the killing and save as much of Hollywood as I can. Yes, I have doubts about some of the content. A lot of us do, although we haven't dared to say it for a long time. Maybe we'll dare to stand up now. Who knows, maybe these terrible things that have happened will finally have the effect of putting a brake on a lot of the really filthy stuff they're putting out, and if so, I can't say I'll be unhappy. I do a lot of children's programming, and I really can't see the point in a group of bright little 6-year-olds singing a song about human genitalia on kiddie shows. But we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Maybe if these people— oh, all right, the Jews— maybe if they're physically scared to put out a constant stream of garbage, then they'll let some of the rest of us have a crack at it and create some decent programming. Bingo again, said Zack with an approving nod. You call us terrorists, Julia, but historically, terrorism is the weapon of the weak against the strong, and as you are learning, it works. We are actually changing the behavior of people with power, changing how they use power and against whom. We are making them stop doing what they were doing. You remember what this town was like when you left, Jewel. How many Mexicans did you see on your drive up here to the house? None, admitted Julia. We did that, Julia, said Hatfield with grim satisfaction. Congress didn't do it. Elections didn't do it. Democracy didn't do it. Signing petitions and marching in the streets and babbling on the internet didn't do it. We did it, with bullets, not ballots. And everyone in this town is better off for it. Ask Ted. I have to admit, Zack and his crowd have almost put us out of a job, admitted Lear with a sigh. Other than NVA stuff, violence and ordinary crime is now almost unheard of here. The Clatsop County Jail used to be so overcrowded with Mexicans, drug-related arrests, hate criminals, and people who said the wrong word, weird sex stuff, thieving drunks and psychos, that we had prisoners sleeping on mattresses in the corridors. Now there are whole weeks at a time when the jail is completely empty. All the Mexicans and non-whites and junkies and other bad actors have gotten the hell out rather than face the NVA, and everybody else has a job and a paycheck and much more stable lives. The hairiest stuff we deal with now is mostly traffic accidents and the odd drunken scuffle in a tavern. We even have time to rescue little girls' kittens stuck in trees again. There are those who would say that the price we have paid for this tranquility and prosperity is too high, that it's wrong. Maybe it is. But I know the people in Clatsop County don't think so. And I know what I thought when I heard what those two sons of bitches from the FBI did to you, Julie, he concluded, his voice beginning to tremble with rage. That went a long way in pushing me towards Zack's way of thinking. Before Julia could respond, the doorbell rang. Zack opened it. Good evening, sir, he said. A lean and dapper man in late middle age stepped into the room, wearing a light green cardigan. A larger man in blue jeans followed him in, wearing a large automatic openly in a shoulder holster over his khaki work shirt. Hey, Dex. "Good evening, Captain," said the man. "Good evening, Sheriff. And you, Mrs. Lear." "It's nice to see you again, Henry," said Julia's mother. "Again?" said Julia, arching her eyebrows. "I've conferred with the sheriff and Captain Hatfield here several times previously, and your mother has favored us with an excellent meal or two," said the man. He extended his hand to Julia. "You must be Julia Lear. I'm Henry Morehouse. I understand you have a message for me from the Burger Kings down there in Tinseltown." "Burger Kings?" asked Julia, puzzled. "BKS," said Zack. "Big kikes." "How many new ethnic slurs have you guys invented since all this started?" inquired Julia curiously. "Being a Nazi means never having to say you're sorry," chuckled Morehouse. "You can call me Red, by the way. Everyone does. You too, Zack. This isn't exactly a formal setting." "Come and sit down in the living room," spoke up Julia's mother. "Do you want something to eat, Henry? How about you, Dexter? I can warm up some meatloaf, put it in a sandwich if you like." "Nothing for me, thanks," said Morehouse. "Dex? A meatloaf sandwich sounds pretty good, ma'am," said Dexter. "I'll be around and about outside." They went into the living room, and Ted Lear moved to the sideboard and poured himself a stiff scotch. "This is one area where we've got it all over you Jerry Rebs," he said with a grim chuckle as he downed it. "We don't have your General Order number 10 hanging around our necks. Julia, do you want me to stay, or is this top-secret conspiracy stuff that I really don't want to know about?" She wasn't sure how to answer. "By all means, Sheriff, stick around," said Morehouse genially. "I suspect Julia will feel more comfortable with you here." Julia's mother brought in a tray of canned soft drinks and coffee, set it down on the center table and left. Hatfield leaned his Winchester in a corner and stuck his hat on the muzzle. "I've been meaning to ask you, what's with the hat and the antique gun?" said Julia. "They're legitimate, in that I like the hat and I like the lever action," said Hatfield. "The media picked up on it, and all of a sudden it kind of became my uniform, or costume would probably be a better word. Like Batman's cape. Obviously, if I'm doing something where I don't want to be noticed, I dress down." They all sat down, but not before Julia also made herself a scotch and soda. "Zack tells me you're the go-to guy I need to be talking to, Red?" she asked Morehouse. "You actually have the authority to make a deal and put a stop to that bloodbath down in Los Angeles?" "More or less," Morehouse told her. "I represent the NVA Army Council, which is kind of our general staff and the de facto governing body in the Republic, until we can remove the occupation forces and establish a government under the provisions of our Northwest Constitution. The Army Council will have to sign off on any eventual deal, but this is just preliminary, and you can take it that what I tell you tonight is the goods. We've already discussed among ourselves a set of acceptable conditions for our terminating operation. We are not amused. Actually, we formulated those conditions before we sent the active service unit down to Los Angeles, so we've thought it all out. We have always known what we want to achieve. Under those conditions, we are prepared to suspend activity against your industry. Suspend, not terminate. To put it bluntly, if those kikes down there try to screw us, then we start dumping them in their swimming pools again, face down. I have an authorized exemption from General Order number 9 issued by the Army Council to negotiate with you, or more accurately with the cartel of studio executives who sent you up here. I understand that your presence here is purely for the purpose of making contact, Mess Lear, which you've done. I'll give you a general outline of what we want, but once you go down and report back, as far as we're concerned, you're out of it. We will appoint someone else to conduct any further dealings along these lines with the entertainment industry. That suits me just fine, said Julia. Look, before you lay out your conditions, you need to know that the men who sent me here have a few of their own, necessary ones because the industry can't operate otherwise. To begin with, movies and television employ hundreds of thousands of people directly and indirectly, and a lot of those are Jewish, and black, and Hispanic, and gay, and every other minority you can think of. It would not only be illegal under federal law to fire all those people based on their race or sexual preference, it would simply be impossible. The industry can't operate without them. These men want to get back to work, not commit economic suicide, and they're not going to commit suicide. If they can't work out a deal with you people, then they're talking about upping stakes and moving the whole entertainment industry out of the country, God knows where. But somewhere they can make movies without being murdered and blown up. They don't want to do it. But you have to understand they're not going to open their veins as the price of peace. "We understand that," said Morehouse with a nod. "In essence, you have just stated the whole rationale behind our strategy of taking back only a small piece of what was once the patrimony of our race. We know perfectly well that the power structure in the United States is not going to just hand over the entire kit and caboodle to us from sea to shining sea, toss us the keys to the apparatus of power, and then toddle off and jump in the ocean. They will, however, eventually be convinced to cut their losses and relinquish to us the Northwest Territory we ask for, once it becomes clear that if they persist in trying to keep the whole loaf for themselves, they may lose everything because they simply won't be able to hold themselves together, and the entire edifice they've built over the past century will come crashing down around their ears. We see this in a microcosm with your film and television industry. We're not asking these big Jews to commit Hebrew harakiri. Before you ask, we've decided we're not even going to ask for any money, as tempting as that was. No, what we want is a generous helping of what I believe you call creative control. In what way?" asked Julia suspiciously. "The Hollywood entertainment industry, including television, is arguably the most potent weapon in the hands of Zog," said Morehouse. "To be blunt, it is possibly the only one that might defeat us in the end. The NVA has already demonstrated that we can survive anything America throws at us by way of police, military, or other armed force. We're already killing these FATPO thugs Hillary sent, and it's pretty obvious they won't be able to beat us either. But if we allow the Jews who control Hollywood and the media to shape the minds and attitudes and perceptions of the American people about us, especially young white people, well, we can't allow that. We won't allow it. Our primary condition is basically that Hollywood adopt a position of neutrality and balance regarding the trouble here in the Northwest. If your industry wants to survive, it must disarm. It must no longer take sides with the government and make itself an arm of the American effort to suppress the Northwest independence movement. That means no vile movies like those Homeland and Great White North abortions, movies made purely to heap contempt and vilification on our people. No more incitement to oppression by glorifying the murderers and torturers of the FBI and other federal agencies as heroes. I assure you, they are not. They are shit that mankind needs to scrape off our shoe. As I understand you have learned from your personal experience." Julia winced, remembering the FBI taser on her neck. No more snide and sneering jokes by late-night talk show hosts. No more spewing of hatred by talking heads on cable news shows. None of this subtle needling here, there, and everywhere in television programming. No more of these stereotypes portraying racially aware white men as cowards and bullies, as stupid misogynists and abusers of women, as dirty and ugly people with black teeth. No more portraying Confederate soldiers and German soldiers as cruel and wicked perpetrators of atrocities against poor defenseless niggers and Jews. No more portraying white fathers as Homer Simpson-like clowns or evil perverts who sexually molest their children. No more constant regurgitation of old propaganda from World War II. No more goddamned lying Holocaust crap purveying vicious and evil lies about things that never happened. The Jews have milked that wicked fantasy long enough, and it's time they packed it in and found another cash cow. Morehouse leaned forward. "But I don't need to go on, Miss Lear. Your Jewish bosses know perfectly well what they've been doing down there for the past 100 years, because they've been doing it deliberately. Now they're going to stop it, or else they will pay with their lives." I'm not sure how I can convey that to them, sir, Red," said Julia carefully. "Are you going to set up some kind of Hays office like they used to have back in the old days, with some kind of code of what's acceptable and what isn't? Like the rule they used to have about even married couples being portrayed always in twin beds and always with at least one foot on the floor? Or some kind of vetting board like the House Committee on UN American Activities set up in the 1950s to try and keep communists out of the industry?" "Neither of those were overly successful, if I recall," remarked Morehouse in a dry voice. "No, they weren't," agreed Julia. "Creative people don't like censorship of any kind. You know it's going to become kind of a game with some of these guys, writers and directors and actors alike. Living dangerously. Trying to see how far they can go without being murdered." "I imagine so," agreed Morehouse with a wry chuckle. "It won't be a perfect arrangement, and I suspect that periodically some of your big shots are still going to wake up with a horse's head in their bed. Or a Jew head." "How exactly would this work?" asked Julia, fascinated in spite of the fact that she knew Morehouse wasn't joking about the Jew head reference. How will the industry know what will get them killed and what will slip under the wire? I think they'll know, said Morehouse. As I said, a large part of this hate whitey shtick out of Hollywood has always been far more deliberate than most people realize. The Jews inadvertently stumbled upon the most perfect vehicle imaginable for expressing their ancient hatred of all non-Jewish life and all non-Talmudic values, and taking their revenge on the hated Goyim by destroying everything we hold sacred and valuable, including our own children. There was indeed once much that was good in America, Miss Lear, the old America before the Jews got their hands on Hollywood. But get hold of it they did. And for almost 100 years they have used it as a weapon to spit on that old America, and the race that for thousands of years has refused to accept their self-proclaimed status as the chosen people of God. I think your bosses will know perfectly well what I am talking about, and they will know that we know. They know what they've been doing, and now they must stop or perish. But you won't be involved in that part of things, ma'am, he went on. What I want you to do is to go back down there and speak with whoever sent you here. Was it Blaustein? Arnold Blaustein, yes, but there's a kind of committee or cartel, as you put it, said Julia. They all gave me my marching orders, so to speak. Okay, you go back and give Blaustein the general outline of what I've just told you. I also want you to give those kikes a name, the name of a man whom we would like for him to hire on as a kind of consultant. If this is going to work, first and foremost, this man is to maintain a low profile. No gossip and variety, no chatter on the internet celebrity sites. None of that crap. It will be the studio executive's responsibility to see that his privacy and identity is protected. He is to be known only to the very top people in the industry, as small a group as possible. They will understand that this is to everyone's advantage. He is to enjoy complete immunity from arrest, interrogation, investigation, surveillance, threats, bribe attempts, assassination, attempted, seduction by luscious starlets to compromise him, poison in his soup, malicious and baseless lawsuits, and harassment of every kind. All Jew tricks are to be kept in the bag. This gentleman is not a member of the NVA, and he will have no contact with the NVA, so there is no point in their following him around or tapping his phone or going through his garbage. There is no way he can lead anyone to the NVA, or there won't be. He is simply someone whom we feel we can trust adequately to express our views. All he will ever give these studio moguls will be his opinions as to how he thinks we might react to a given situation. An educated guess. But his opinion will be a very informed one, and his guesses will be very educated indeed. We suggest in the strongest possible terms that Mr. Blaustein and his people listen to this man and comply with his suggestions. Have you got all this? Yes, said Julia. The envelope, please. I beg your pardon, asked Morehouse. The name, said Julia. Don't you watch the Oscars? Sorry, it was a tasteless joke in view of the circumstances. Actually, I watched the Oscars for the first time this year, said Morehouse with a quiet smile. The finale was a real blast. Now that's a tasteless joke. The name of this gentleman with the informed opinions is Barry Brewer. You may have heard of him. Barry Brewer is Erica Collingwood's agent, exclaimed Julia. So that's how, sorry. Look, Red. Suppose I give them Barry's name and they turn him over to the FBI, or they just have him killed. Their version of putting a horse's head in your bed. Then he will be avenged, said Morehouse calmly. However, before you leave, I want to give you a little conversation piece. The last time you saw Mr. Blaustein, did he have to ask you the time? No, not me, but he did ask his secretary, said Julia curiously. That was just before I went to the Los Angeles airport. He said he'd lost his Rolex. He was really pissed off about it, said it was a birthday gift from his wife. Dorothy Blaustein, yes. Morehouse pulled a gold watch out of his short pocket and handed it to her. Quite expensive diamond settings, must be worth at least 50 grand. You can see, it's inscribed on the back of the case, to Arnie from Dottie, and the date. It was removed from his nightstand in his Beverly Hills mansion several nights ago, while he and his wife were both asleep. No alarm was tripped, none of his guards saw anything, and his dog didn't bark. Give this to him when you see him, and tell him it would be wise to treat Mr. Brewer with courtesy and respect, always. It's not a horse's head, but I think he'll get the message. Zack's wireless phone bleeped. He opened it and listened for almost a minute, then closed it. A grim expression was on his face. "Damn," he said softly. He looked up at Lear. "Ted, you and I need to talk. It looks like our luck has run out." "What do you mean?" demanded Lear. "That was Brigade," Hatfield told them. "They've confirmed that we're about to get some unwelcome tourists here in Astoria. Fatty's coming in force." Sheriff Ted Lear was the first to speak. "I didn't hear anything about that," he protested. "I know you didn't, Ted, or you wouldn't have let Julia come up here," replied Hatfield. Morehouse spoke up. "That means that you weren't told anything by either the Oregon State Attorney General or by the feds or anyone else, which is bad news for you. That means that the federals consider your department to be compromised, which of course it is, from their point of view. That in turn means that the FATPO aren't coming just for us. They're coming for you, and most likely for your family as well, and for anyone they consider to be on your team. FATPO always enters an area with two lists in their pockets, Sheriff. One is a list of alleged nationalist or NVA sympathizers. Sometimes those lists are accurate, sometimes they're not. I think you can assume that you're on that list, and maybe your mom and Julia here if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, which is the case more often than not with this government. The second list is one of potential unionist collaborators, or loyal Americans as they would say, people who can be relied on, to rat out any of their neighbors with nationalist inclinations, anybody with NVA-connected family members, so forth and so on. "We had an informant in your department from the very first, Ted," Hatfield said. "Which means that the government probably has at least one in your department as well," Hatfield went on remorselessly. "We'll find out who after you are kicked out of office and, maybe interned or disappeared, and we see who gets to become the next sheriff of Clatsop County. Who has a hankering for your job, Ted? Anyone spring to mind?" "Maybe," replied Lear with a weary sigh. "Well, whoever it is, you can bet they know that the FATPO are coming soon. And when they take over, they'll replace most local law enforcement here with politically reliable officers, most likely assorted minorities from outside the area. Same with the Astoria and Seaside PDs, you get the idea. Looks like our days of peaceful if occasionally bumpy coexistence are at an end. The shit's going to hit the fan, I'm afraid." "Damn," said Lear with a sigh, his shoulders sagging. "I really hoped we'd make it through somehow. What the hell should I do in the meantime?" "Prepare to be invaded and occupied," said Morehouse levelly. "Get back to your office and start cleaning house. Destroy any and all records, correspondence, emails, logs, evidence, gun records, anything that the federals might use to identify local people and target them for arrest and victimization. Format all the hard drives on your computers. Release all white prisoners in your jail, whatever they've done. Handing them over to these body-armored federal gangsters is too much of a punishment. If anyone protests, he's probably your rat. Deal with him at your discretion. Remove all guns and ammunition and as much other equipment as you can from your armories and CSO and the local PDs. Stash it all away somewhere to prevent the FATPO from seizing them and using them against the people in this county. Hide or destroy anything you have that you don't want used to do harm to the people here, because these apes are coming to do nothing but harm. Start making calls to anyone who qualifies as a real community leader and tell them to batten down the hatches. Above all, insofar as it is at all humanly possible, save the children. Tell people to get their kids to safety any way they can, even if it's out of the Northwest for a while. This is the Iron Heel, Ted, and it is coming here to crush and to maim and to destroy all resistance to the tyranny in Washington, D.C. Prepare for it like you would prepare for a tsunami. If I were you, I wouldn't be around when our new lords and masters roll up to your office in their black armored cars. They probably mean to kill you." "Oh, God," moaned Julia. "Julia, getting back to your mission. We need to get you the hell out of here." "Tonight," said Morehouse. "Zack, I know you've got a million things to do, but before anything else, you need to give that skell Wally a call, and then get her back down to the dock and on that boat back to Portland." "I'm on it," said Zack, opening his phone. "I'll give her a ride," said Ted. "Looks like I have to go back to work, so it's on the way." Morehouse looked at her gravely. "Julia, I'm going to ask that you don't tell Walter Post anything specific about why you're leaving early and not spending the night. Just say you and Zack had a lover's quarrel or something." Julia couldn't help but give a feeble giggle. "We don't know whose side he's on, most probably his own, and in his hands a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. He might try to make some money by letting the fatties know that we've been tipped off, and that can get a lot of people killed. Including your brother and including Zack. I won't say anything, said Julia, shaking her head. Good thing I didn't even get a chance to unpack. Thank you, ma'am, said Morehouse gravely. Zack stood up. Okay, I'm out of here, and you'd best be rolling along as well, Red. I think the AC would want you out of the area. If you don't mind, I'll stick around and do anything I can to help until I'm flat-out ordered to E&E, said Morehouse. Suit yourself. Geraldine, it's always a pleasure to see you, said Hatfield to Mrs. Lear, and I'm sorry it can't be under better circumstances. It will be someday, Zack, said the old lady quietly. For now you have to do what a man has to do, as do you, Ted. I don't have to add I will be praying for you both. And you, Henry, even if you are a Nazi atheist. Nazi agnostic, ma'am, said Morehouse, rising. Hatfield turned to Julia, who had also stood up. Julie, it was really good seeing you again. Just wish it didn't have to be so brief. Let's not make it 14 years next time. He leaned over and kissed her on the forehead. Take care of yourself. He picked up his rifle and pulled the broad-brimmed hat down over his head, turned and headed out the door. Julia followed him and caught up with him on the porch, putting her hand on his arm. He turned to look at her, and by the porch light he saw tears glistening in her eyes. This is just like Iraq all over again, she whispered. I don't want you to die. I'm scared I'll do what I did back then, make myself forget about you so that when I finally heard you were dead, it wouldn't destroy me as well. Now that I've seen you, I can't go through that again. It takes too long and it puts scar tissue over everything in me. I can't live like that anymore. Before you came tonight, I was wondering whether or not I would say anything to you, replied Hatfield quietly. Then this other stuff came up, which reminded me loud and clear of all the reasons why I shouldn't, but what the hell? If it's ever possible for us to meet again under some kind of sane circumstances, and if it seems appropriate at the time, there's some things I want to talk to you about. I guess you know what? Yes, I know, she told him. Well, that time isn't now. I meant what I said. Take care, honey. He leaned over and kissed her again, this time gently on the lips, and turned and went out into the darkness.